I want to tell you something that might sound impossible at first, but I promise you, by the time we finish this conversation, you will understand a truth so powerful it will change everything you thought you knew about healing, about pain, about the magnificent instrument that beats in your chest right now. Your heart is listening to you, right now. In this very moment, every word you speak to it, every thought you direct toward it, every feeling you allow to wash over it, your heart receives like a faithful servant standing at attention. And here is what most people never discover in their entire lifetime. Your heart does not just listen, it responds, it heals, it transforms, it restores itself according to the instructions you give it. I have spent decades studying the hidden laws that govern human experience, diving deep into the mysteries of the subconscious mind, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that there exists a law, a divine law, that operates with the same precision as gravity, as electricity, as the turning of the earth. I call it the law of divine restoration, and it is working in your life right now, whether you know it or not. But most people, and perhaps this includes you, have been speaking the wrong language to their hearts. They have been sending messages of fear, of doubt, of unworthiness. They have been programming their hearts with the virus of negativity, and then they wonder why they feel broken, why nothing seems to heal, why the wounds from 5 years ago still throb as if they happened yesterday. Let me be clear about something from the very beginning. When I talk about your heart, I am not just talking about that physical organ pumping blood through your veins, though that too responds to your words in ways that would astonish you. I am talking about the emotional center of your being, that place where you feel joy and sorrow, hope and despair, love and loss. I am talking about the seat of your subconscious mind, that vast reservoir of power that controls 90% of everything you experience. Your heart has been wounded. I know this because you are human, and to be human is to carry scars. Someone betrayed you, someone left you, someone told you that you were not enough. Life dealt you a blow you did not see coming, and the pain settled into your heart like a stone sinking to the bottom of a deep well. And that pain is still there, is it not? You can feel it right now as I speak these words. That tightness in your chest, that heaviness, that exhaustion that no amount of sleep seems to fix. But what if I told you that the same heart that learned to hurt can learn to heal? What if I told you that divine restoration is not something you have to beg for, not something reserved for the lucky few, but your birthright, available to you right now through a simple shift in how you communicate with the most important part of yourself? You see, there is a conversation happening inside you every single moment of every single day. Most people are completely unaware of it. It is the conversation between your conscious mind and your subconscious mind, between your thoughts and your heart, and this conversation is writing the story of your life in real time. When you say to yourself, even silently, I am heartbroken, your subconscious mind, which cannot distinguish between a real event and a vividly imagined one, accepts this as an instruction manual. It says, we are heartbroken. Let me make sure the body, the emotions, the energy field all align with this truth. And so your heart remains broken, not because it must be, but because you keep telling it to be. But when you begin to speak a different language, when you begin to declare with feeling and conviction, my heart is healing now. Divine restoration is flowing through every cell of my being. I am made whole by the infinite intelligence within me. Something miraculous begins to happen. The subconscious mind, that faithful servant, says, we are healing now. Let me mobilize every resource, every bit of divine energy, every healing power available to make this new truth a living reality. This is not positive thinking. This is not pretending everything is fine when it is not. This is the activation of a universal law that has existed since the beginning of time. The law of divine restoration states that there is within you an infinite healing presence, a divine intelligence that knows exactly how to restore you to wholeness, and this presence responds to your faith, your words, your mental images. I've seen this law work in the most impossible situations. I have witnessed hearts that were shattered into 1,000 pieces become whole again. I have watched people who were drowning in grief and anguish rise up into joy and peace. Not through magic, not through luck, but through the conscious, deliberate application of this divine law. And I am here to teach you how to do the same. Not tomorrow, Not someday, but starting right now, in this moment. Because your heart has been waiting for you to learn this language. It has been longing for you to take command of your inner world. It has been ready to heal, and it needs only one thing from you: the right instructions, delivered with faith and feeling. So, let me ask you a question, and I want you to answer honestly, just between us. When was the last time you spoke kindly to your heart? When was the last time you placed your hand over your chest and said with genuine tenderness, "I love you, I am here for you, you are safe now"? When was the last time you treated your own heart with the same compassion you would offer a hurting child? If you are like most people, the answer is never. Most people speak more kindly to their cars, to their pets, to complete strangers than they do to their own hearts. They beat themselves up with criticism. They replay painful memories over and over like a broken record. They rehearse future disasters that have not even happened yet. And then they wonder why they feel so exhausted, so depleted, so incapable of experiencing joy. But today, this pattern ends. Today, you learn the truth about divine restoration. Today, you discover that healing is not something that happens to you, it is something that happens through you as you align your thoughts, your words, and your feelings with the infinite healing power that dwells within you right now. Your heart is the garden, and your thoughts are the seeds. For too long, you have been planting weeds, thorns, and thistles. You have been watering them with your attention, feeding them with your emotional energy, and naturally, your garden has become overgrown with suffering. But the soil itself is not damaged. The potential for beauty, for flourishing, for abundant life remains intact. You simply need to plant different seeds. This is the promise of divine restoration. No matter what has happened to you, no matter how long you have been in pain, no matter how deep the wounds run, there is within you right now a power greater than any circumstance, any past event, any diagnosis, any heartbreak. There is within you the same power that heals a cut on your finger without your conscious effort, the same intelligence that grows a baby from a single cell, the same force that turns winter into spring year after year without fail. And this power responds to you, it listens to you, it waits for your command. So, I am going to teach you how to speak to this power. I am going to show you the language of divine restoration. I am going to share with you the techniques that have worked for thousands of people, techniques rooted in universal law, in spiritual truth, in the very fabric of how consciousness operates. But first, you must understand something crucial. Healing does not mean forgetting. Healing does not mean pretending the pain never happened. Healing means integrating what happened into a larger story of resilience, of growth, of ultimate triumph. Healing means that what once controlled you no longer has power over you. Healing means you can remember without bleeding, you can look back without falling apart, you can acknowledge the past without being imprisoned by it. This is what divine restoration offers you. Not escape, not denial, but transformation. It takes the raw material of your pain and fashions it into wisdom. It takes the broken pieces of your heart and creates something more beautiful than what existed before. Like the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is mended with gold, divine restoration does not hide your cracks. It illuminates them as the very source of your beauty, your strength, your unique magnificence. Your heart knows this already. Some part of you recognizes this truth even as I speak it. That is why you are still here, still listening, still holding on to hope even when everything in your experience has tried to convince you that hope is foolish. That is the divine intelligence within you, refusing to give up, refusing to accept brokenness as your final condition, insisting that wholeness is possible. And it is right. Your heart is right. Hope is not foolish. Healing is not just possible, it is inevitable once you align yourself with the law of divine restoration. So take a deep breath with me right now. Feel the air entering your lungs. Feel your heart beating steadily in your chest. That beat is life itself, pulsing through you, sustaining you, carrying you forward even when you felt like giving up. Your heart has been fighting for you all along. It has never stopped working on your behalf. And now, finally, you are going to learn how to work with it, how to partner with it, how to activate the full measure of its healing power. This is going to be a journey, you and me, into the deepest truths of human experience. I am going to share stories with you that will break your heart open in the best possible way. I am going to teach you lessons that will rewire how you think about pain and healing. I am going to give you practical techniques you can use immediately to begin the process of divine restoration in your own life. But I need you to come into this with an open mind and an open heart. I need you to be willing to question some of the beliefs you have been holding about yourself, about healing, about what is possible for you. I need you to suspend your skepticism just long enough to try what I am suggesting, to test these principles in the laboratory of your own life and see what results you get. Because this is not theory, this is not philosophy. This is practical, applicable truth that works every single time it is properly applied. The law of divine restoration is as reliable as any law of physics, but it requires your participation, your faith, your willingness to change the story you have been telling yourself. Are you ready? Are you willing? Then let us begin this journey together. Let me take you into the heart of this teaching, into the stories and lessons and practices that will change everything for you. Your heart is listening. It is time to speak to it in a language it can respond to. It is time to activate the law of divine restoration in your life. It is time, at long last, for you to heal. Now, I want to take you back to a time in my own life when I first discovered this truth about divine restoration. I was not always the person you know today, confident in these teachings, certain of these principles. There was a time when I too was broken, when my heart was heavy with grief and confusion, when I wondered if healing was even possible for someone like me. I was a young man, and I had just experienced a devastating loss. Someone I loved deeply had left my life suddenly, without warning, without explanation. And the pain of that abandonment settled into my chest like a physical weight. I could barely breathe some days. I would wake up in the morning and for just a moment, I would forget what had happened, and then the memory would crash over me like a wave, and I would have to face another day of this unbearable ache. I tried everything I could think of to make the pain go away. I threw myself into work, hoping exhaustion would numb me. I sought out the advice of friends, hoping someone would have the magic words that would fix me. I even prayed, though at that time, my prayers were mostly just complaints to God about how unfair life was, how much I was suffering, how I did not deserve this. Nothing worked. The pain remained, constant and crushing, and slowly, I began to believe that this was just how life was going to be from now on. I began to accept heartbreak as my permanent condition. I told myself, this is just who I am now. I am the person who got hurt, who got left behind, who is fundamentally broken. And then one day, I came across a book that would change everything. It was about the power of the subconscious mind, about how our inner thoughts and beliefs create our outer experiences. At first, I was skeptical. It sounded too simple, too good to be true. But something in me, some small voice of hope that had not yet been extinguished, said, "What do you have to lose? Try it." So, I began to experiment with speaking to my subconscious mind in a new way. Instead of rehashing the story of my pain over and over, I started to affirm, I am healing. Divine love is restoring my heart. I am whole and complete in myself. At first, these words felt hollow, like lies I was telling myself. My conscious mind rebelled against them. It said, "This is ridiculous. You are not healed. You are not whole. Look at how much you are hurting." But I persisted. Every morning and every night, I would sit quietly, place my hand over my heart, and speak to myself as if I were speaking to a frightened child. I am worthy of love. I am whole and complete. My heart is healing, and I am becoming stronger every day. At first, it felt like lying. The words seemed to bounce off an invisible wall, but I understood something crucial. My subconscious mind does not argue. It does not debate. It simply accepts what is repeated with feeling and conviction. Within 3 weeks, something shifted. The pain was still there, but it no longer defined me. I began to notice moments of peace. I started to sleep through the night, and one morning, I woke up and realized I had gone an entire evening without thinking about her. That was the moment I knew the technique was working. Your subconscious mind is like a garden. Whatever seeds you plant, it will grow. If you plant seeds of unworthiness, rejection, and pain, that is what will flourish in your life. But if you plant seeds of love, healing, and wholeness, your inner garden will transform before your eyes. This is not about pretending the pain does not exist. It is about refusing to let that pain become your identity. You acknowledge the hurt, yes, but you do not worship it. You do not build an altar to your suffering and pray there every day. I have seen people carry heartbreak for 5 years, 10 years, even decades, because they believed their pain was proof of how deeply they loved. But let me tell you something that might sting. Holding on to pain is not loyalty. It is self-abandonment. The person who left is living their life, and you are here, frozen in time, guarding a wound that wants to heal. Your subconscious is waiting for new instructions. It is listening right now. Every thought you think, every word you speak about yourself, it is recording and accepting as truth. So what are you telling it? Are you telling it that you are unworthy? That success is for other people? That money is the root of all evil? That you could never have what you truly desire? Or are you telling it the truth? That you are a divine creation? That abundance is your birthright? That the same power that created galaxies lives within you? Listen carefully. Your subconscious mind does not argue with you. It does not judge your commands. It does not say, well, that seems unreasonable. It simply accepts and executes. This is both its power and your responsibility. Think of it like the soil in a garden. The soil does not decide which seeds are worthy of growing. It accepts all seeds equally, whether they are flowers or weeds, and brings them to life with perfect impartiality. Your subconscious is the same. It will manifest poverty as faithfully as it manifests prosperity. It will create sickness as readily as it creates health. The choice of what seeds you plant is entirely yours. I have seen people destroy their own lives through the persistent misuse of this law. I knew a talented young man, brilliant in his field, who constantly said, I always mess up the big opportunities. And do you know what happened? Every single time a major opportunity appeared, something would go wrong. He would forget important details, say the wrong thing, or fall ill at the crucial moment. His subconscious was simply being obedient. It was giving him exactly what he repeatedly claimed about himself. But I have also witnessed the opposite. I have watched people rise from nothing, transform their entire existence, simply by changing the instructions they gave to their subconscious mind. They stopped planting weeds and started planting roses. And their inner garden transformed accordingly. You see, most people live their entire lives never realizing they possess this power. They go through their days reacting to circumstances, believing themselves victims of fate, prisoners of their past, or casualties of bad luck. They look at their bank account and say, I am poor. They look at their body and say, I am sick. They look at their relationships and say, I am unlucky in love. And with every such statement, they are issuing a command to the subconscious mind, which obediently goes to work making that statement a permanent reality. This is not philosophy. This is not theory. This is the mechanics of your mind. When you understand this principle, you stop being a victim and become a creator. You realize that every thought you think, every word you speak, every image you hold in your imagination is a seed planted in the fertile soil of your subconscious. And that soil doesn't judge. It doesn't question. It simply grows whatever you plant. I want you to pause right now and ask yourself, what have I been planting? Look at your life honestly. Look at your health, your finances, your relationships, your level of peace or anxiety. These are not random occurrences. They are the harvest of seeds you planted months and years ago through your habitual thinking. If you don't like the harvest, you must change the seeds. This is where most people stumble. They want to change their circumstances without changing their thoughts. They want a different harvest while continuing to plant the same seeds. It doesn't work that way. You cannot think thoughts of lack and experience abundance. You cannot dwell on illness and manifest health. You cannot rehearse failure in your mind and perform success in your life. The subconscious mind is law. It is principle. And like all natural law, it is impersonal and unchanging. Gravity doesn't care whether you're a good person or a bad person. Step off a cliff and you fall. The same applies to the law of your subconscious. It doesn't care about your intentions or your deservingness. It only responds to the nature of your habitual thinking. Your subconscious mind is impersonal. It's a recording device, a servant awaiting your command. When you impress a thought upon it with feeling and conviction, it accepts that thought as true and begins to create circumstances, attract people, and orchestrate events to make that thought your reality. This is why two people can live in the same city, work in the same building, have access to the same opportunities, and yet experience completely different lives. One prospers while the other struggles. One finds love while the other faces rejection. One enjoys vibrant health while the other battles illness. The difference isn't luck. It isn't fate. It's the habitual pattern of thought that each person has impressed upon their subconscious mind. Let me share something that might shock you. Every condition in your life right now, whether you like it or not, is a reflection of the mental patterns you've been holding. Your bank account is a reflection. Your relationships are a reflection. Your health is a reflection. Your level of happiness is a reflection. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. But Joseph, terrible things have happened to me that I never wanted. How could I have created those? Listen carefully. I'm not saying you consciously created every circumstance. But I am saying that your subconscious impressions, including those formed by fear, worry, and negative expectations, have creative power just as real as your positive thoughts. If you've been habitually worried about losing your job, your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between your worry and your desire. It simply responds to the dominant impression. Worry about loss is actually meditation on loss, and what you meditate upon, you tend to manifest. This is not punishment. This is not cosmic cruelty. This is simply the law in operation, as neutral and consistent as gravity. When you reject negative thoughts, when you refuse to give them your emotional agreement, they have no power over you. They're like uninvited guests at your door. You don't have to let them in. You don't have to serve them dinner. You can simply acknowledge them and close the door. I've watched people transform their entire lives by changing this one habit. A woman came to me drowning in resentment toward her sister. For years, she'd rehearsed the same grievances, the same wounds, the same bitter stories. Her health was failing. Her relationships were poisoned. Her finances were stuck. I told her what I'm telling you now. Stop feeding the monster. Every time a resentful thought arose, she was to replace it immediately. I wish her well. I release this. I am free. At first, she could barely say the words. Her ego screamed in protest. But she persisted. Within 3 months, not only had their relationship healed, but she received an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative. Her chronic pain diminished. Her entire countenance changed. This wasn't magic. This was law. She stopped impressing her subconscious with negativity, and her subconscious stopped creating negative conditions. Your subconscious mind doesn't argue with you. It doesn't say, "Are you sure you want to feel afraid? Let's discuss this rationally." It simply accepts what you impress upon it and sets about making it real in your experience. This is why worry is so destructive. When you worry, you're praying for what you don't want. You're creating vivid mental images of disaster, feeling the emotion of loss or failure, and your subconscious mind says, "Understood," creating that now. The worrier wonders why calamity follows them. The anxious person can't understand why their fears keep manifesting. But there's no mystery here. They're simply using the law against themselves. Now, here's what many people misunderstand about this teaching. They think I'm saying you should suppress your emotions, that you should pretend everything is fine when it isn't, that you should wear a false smile while your world crumbles. That's not what I'm saying at all. There's a profound difference between acknowledging a problem and dwelling in it, between recognizing a challenge and making it your identity, between feeling an emotion and feeding it until it consumes you. When a negative thought or feeling arises, observe it, recognize it, but don't invite it to stay. Don't give it the chair by the fire and your full attention. Instead, observe it as you would a cloud passing through the sky. You wouldn't chase a cloud. You wouldn't wrestle it to the ground. You simply watch it drift by, knowing another will come, and another, and that none of them define the vastness of the sky itself. Your mind is that sky, infinite, clear, boundless. The thoughts are just weather passing through. Now here's where people stumble. They think, "But Joseph, if I just observe my negative thoughts, won't they keep coming back? Won't they gain power?" No. The opposite happens. When you stop resisting, you stop feeding. Resistance is attention. Resistance is energy. And whatever you give energy to grows. Think of a child throwing a tantrum in a store. If the parent panics, argues, pleads, the tantrum escalates. But if the parent remains calm, present, unbothered, the tantrum loses its fuel. It fizzles out because it's not getting the reaction it needs to survive. Your negative thoughts are the same. They thrive on your panic. They grow strong when you fight them, when you fear them, when you try to shove them into a closet and bolt the door. But when you simply notice them, when you say, "Ah, there's that thought again. Hello. Goodbye," something miraculous happens. The thought passes. It doesn't stick. It doesn't spiral into an hour of mental torture. It just moves through you like water through a stream. And over time, those thoughts come less frequently. They lose their grip because you've stopped being their accomplice. This is the essence of mental freedom, not the absence of negative thoughts, but the refusal to be enslaved by them. You become the observer, not the victim, the witness, not the prisoner. And from that place of observation, from that place of calm awareness, you can finally choose. You can choose which thoughts deserve your attention, which ideas you want to nourish, which beliefs you want to build your life upon. This is where your power lives, not in perfection, but in choice. You see, I spent decades watching people walk into my office, sit in my seminars, read my words, and I noticed something peculiar. The ones who transformed their lives weren't necessarily the most educated. They weren't the wealthiest or the most connected. What they had was this willingness to examine their belief inventory, to actually look at what they were carrying around in their mental warehouse. Most people never do this. They're like hoarders of the mind, clutching beliefs they inherited from a grandmother who lived through the Depression, holding on to ideas about money that came from a father who was bitter about his own failures. They're storing concepts about love that they absorbed from watching their parents' cold marriage, and they wonder why their own lives feel suffocating. Here's what I want you to understand. Your subconscious doesn't judge your beliefs. It doesn't say, "Oh, this belief will hurt you, so I won't execute it." No. It's completely impersonal. It's like soil, it will grow whatever seed you plant. Plant thorns, you get thorns. Plant roses, you get roses. It doesn't have a preference. This is simultaneously the most terrifying and the most liberating truth you'll ever encounter. Terrifying because it means you can't blame the soil. The subconscious is doing exactly what it's designed to do. Liberating because it means you can change the harvest simply by changing the seeds. I remember a woman, I'll call her Patricia, who came to me absolutely convinced she was not a creative person. She said it like it was a medical diagnosis. Where did this belief come from? A high school art teacher who criticized her painting technique 30 years prior. 30 years. And she'd been living inside that prison ever since, never writing the poetry she felt inside, never trying the crafts that called to her. We worked together, and I asked her a simple question. What if that teacher was just having a terrible day? What if she was going through a divorce and taking it out on students? Patricia looked at me like I'd suggested the earth was flat. The possibility that this defining belief was built on sand, on one person's momentary opinion, had never occurred to her. Within 6 months of releasing that belief and installing a new one, Patricia had published 3 poems and started teaching art to children. The creativity was always there. The belief was the only thing blocking it. You see, your subconscious doesn't argue with you. It doesn't debate. It doesn't say, "Well, actually, let me think about that." No, it accepts. It receives. It acts on what you give it with complete neutrality, like soil receiving a seed. Plant a tomato seed, you get tomatoes. Plant weeds, you get weeds. The soil doesn't judge. It doesn't prefer one over the other. It simply grows whatever you plant. And that's exactly how your subconscious works with beliefs. Now here's where most people go wrong. They think they can plant new seeds while the old weeds are still growing wild. They affirm abundance while their deeper mind is still running poverty programs. They declare health while subconsciously expecting illness. They speak confidence while internally believing they're inadequate. This doesn't work. And when it doesn't work, they blame the method. They say affirmations don't work. They say the law of attraction is nonsense. They say positive thinking is naive. But the method isn't the problem. The problem is they never actually changed the underlying belief. They put wallpaper over a cracked wall and wondered why the crack still shows through. Real transformation requires you to go deeper. to actually uproot the old belief and plant a new one in fertile ground. So, how do you do this? How do you actually change a belief that's been running your life for decades? First, you must identify it clearly, not vaguely, not generally, specifically. Write it down, look at it, name it. Second, you must recognize it as false, not just intellectually, but viscerally. You must see that it never was true, that it was only ever an idea someone handed you or an interpretation you created from limited information. Third, you must choose a new belief deliberately. Not wishful thinking, not fantasy. A belief that aligns with truth, with possibility, with the infinite intelligence that created you. And fourth, this is crucial, you must impress this new belief into your subconscious mind through feeling, through repetition, through the state of consciousness you maintain. Your subconscious doesn't argue with you, it doesn't debate, it accepts whatever you consistently impress upon it with feeling. This is why two people can read the same book on prosperity, attend the same seminar, hear the same truths, and one transforms their life while the other remains exactly where they were. The difference isn't in the information, the difference is in the impression. One person reads with mild interest and goes back to their worried thoughts. The other reads with feeling, with conviction, and they don't just understand the principle, they feel it moving in their being, they claim it, they own it. Let me give you a concrete example. I knew a woman who came to me years ago, completely broken financially. Not just broken. She had been raised to believe that money was evil, that wanting more was selfish, that poverty was somehow more spiritual than abundance. These beliefs had been hammered into her consciousness since childhood. Now here's what she did. She didn't just try to think positive thoughts about money. That would have been like trying to plant roses in concrete. First, she had to break up that concrete, those hardened beliefs. She began to study truth. She learned that money is simply a symbol of exchange, that God is the source of all supply, that the universe is abundant by nature. She identified her specific belief: I am not worthy of financial abundance. She could see now that this belief was false, that it contradicted spiritual law. Then she constructed a new belief: I am a beloved child of infinite abundance, and prosperity flows to me naturally and easily. Every night before sleep, she repeated this truth to herself. Every morning upon waking, she affirmed it with feeling. When doubts arose, and they did arise, she didn't fight them. She simply recognized them as the old pattern trying to reassert itself, thanked them for their concern, and gently returned to her new conviction. Within 3 months, her financial situation had completely transformed. A former colleague reached out with a consulting opportunity. An unexpected tax refund arrived. She received a promotion she hadn't even applied for. But more importantly, her relationship with money had fundamentally shifted. She no longer approached it with anxiety and grasping. She moved through the world with a quiet confidence that her needs would always be met, and they were. This is the power of conscious belief revision. You are not a victim of your beliefs. You are their creator. And what you have created, you can recreate. Consider the person who believes they are unlovable. This belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They enter relationships with guardedness and suspicion. They interpret neutral actions as rejection. They push away affection because it doesn't align with their self-concept. Eventually, relationships fail, and the person says, "See, I knew I was unlovable, but the belief created the outcome, not the other way around." To change this pattern, you must first become aware of the belief itself. Many people carry beliefs they've never consciously examined. These beliefs were absorbed in childhood, inherited from parents, adopted from culture, formed in moments of pain. They operate beneath the surface, directing your life like an invisible hand. They are running your life, but you did not choose them. You inherited them. You absorbed them. They came to you before you had the capacity to question them. A child who is told repeatedly that money doesn't grow on trees, that people like us don't succeed, that the world is a dangerous place, this child doesn't analyze these statements. They accept them as truth. They integrate them into the foundation of their identity. And then, decades later, you wonder why you can't seem to break through certain barriers. You work hard, you try, you push, but there's an invisible ceiling you keep hitting. That ceiling isn't external. It's the limit of your subconscious belief about what's possible for you. I've seen this pattern countless times. A woman comes to me frustrated because no matter what she does, she cannot save money. Every time she gets ahead, something happens: an unexpected expense, an impulse purchase, a crisis. She believes she's cursed, that money slips through her fingers. But when we examine her childhood, we discover her parents constantly fought about money. She watched her mother hide purchases from her father. She heard, again and again, that having money caused problems, created conflict, destroyed peace. Her subconscious conclusion? Money equals pain, safety equals being broke. So her subconscious, trying to protect her, ensures she never has enough money to trigger that pain. It's not sabotage, it's protection. Misguided protection based on childhood logic, but protection nonetheless. Or consider the man who cannot maintain a relationship. Every partnership starts with promise, with hope, with genuine connection. And everyone ends the same way. He pulls away, creates distance, finds reasons to leave. He tells himself he hasn't found the right person. But the pattern reveals something deeper. When we explore his history, we find that his first experience of love was also his first experience of abandonment. His mother left when he was 7. The subconscious lesson? Love equals abandonment. To avoid the pain of being left, he leaves first. These are not conscious choices. These are subconscious programs running automatically, steering the ship while you think you're in control. And the cost is staggering. Not just what you lose: relationships, opportunities, peace of mind, but what you never attempt. The dreams you dismiss before they take shape, the conversations you avoid, the love you keep at arm's length. Your subconscious doesn't want you to fail. It's trying to protect you. But it's working with outdated maps, fighting wars that ended years ago, building walls around threats that no longer exist. Here's what most people don't realize: your subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between a real experience and one vividly imagined. This isn't metaphor. This is neuroscience meeting ancient wisdom. When you imagine something with emotional intensity, your subconscious accepts it as fact. It doesn't question, it doesn't analyze, it simply records and responds. This is why worry works so effectively against you. You're not just thinking about potential problems, you're programming your subconscious to expect them, to watch for them, to unconsciously create conditions where they become more likely. Every time you replay that argument in your mind, you're not processing, you're rehearsing, you're deepening the neural pathway. You're teaching your subconscious that this is what relationships look like, this is what you deserve, this is what always happens. And then you wonder why the pattern repeats. But here's where it gets interesting. If your subconscious accepts imagination as reality, then you can use this same mechanism deliberately. You can reprogram it, not through willpower, not through positive thinking plastered over deep-seated beliefs, but through a specific process that speaks the language your subconscious actually understands. Your subconscious communicates in images, emotions, and repetition, not logic, not arguments, not shoulds and oughtos. This is why affirmations fail for most people. They're standing in front of a mirror saying, "I am confident," while every cell in their body screams the opposite. The subconscious isn't stupid. It feels the contradiction, and it sides with the deeper, older belief every single time. Let me tell you what happens next. You start working harder. You affirm louder. You visualize longer. You think, maybe I'm just not doing enough. But here's the truth. Effort without belief is just noise. You can shout affirmations into a mirror for an hour every morning. You can plaster your walls with vision boards. You can read every self-help book ever written. But if underneath all that activity, there's a quiet voice whispering, "This won't work for me," then guess what? That whisper wins. Because the subconscious doesn't respond to volume, it responds to conviction. Think about the people in your life who seem to attract success effortlessly. They're not working harder than you. They're not more talented. They're not saying affirmations 20 times a day. They simply expect good things to happen. It's woven into their identity. They don't hope for success, they assume it. That assumption is what we're after. Now, let's get something straight. I'm not saying your current beliefs are your fault. You didn't wake up one day and decide to doubt yourself. These patterns were installed in you, often before you could even speak. Maybe you grew up hearing, money doesn't grow on trees. Maybe every time you wanted something you were told, we can't afford that. Maybe your parents fought about bills every single night, and you absorbed the message that money equals stress, conflict, pain. Or maybe it wasn't about money at all. Maybe every time you tried something new, someone laughed. Maybe your ideas were dismissed. Maybe you learned that being small, quiet, and unambitious was the safest way to move through the world. None of that was your fault. But here's where responsibility comes in. It's your job now to undo it. The subconscious is like a garden. Right now, it's overgrown with weeds, beliefs that choke out possibility. You didn't plant those weeds, but you're the only one who can pull them out. And until you do, no amount of planting new seeds will matter. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about those negative roots. They have a protection mechanism. They fight back. When you first start trying to reprogram your mind, when you first begin affirming, I am prosperous or I am worthy of love, something strange happens. The old beliefs don't just quietly fade away, they get louder. They marshal their defenses. They bring receipts. You say, I am successful, and immediately a voice in your head says, oh really? Then why did you fail last time? And the time before that? And remember that thing you tried when you were 23? That was embarrassing. This is what I call the backfire effect. And most people quit right here. They think, see, affirmations don't work. I feel worse now than before I started. But what's actually happening is profound. Those old beliefs are fighting for their survival. They've had your subconscious mind all to themselves for years, maybe decades. Now you're threatening their territory. Of course they're going to fight back. This is why persistence is everything. This is why I tell people, the first 2 weeks of reconditioning your mind will feel like walking through mud. You'll feel ridiculous. You'll feel like a fraud. You'll feel like you're lying to yourself. Good. That means it's working. Because that discomfort you're feeling, that's the gap between where your conscious mind wants to go and where your subconscious mind currently lives. That tension is necessary. It's the friction that creates transformation. Let me give you a real example. A woman came to one of my lectures years ago. She wanted to heal a relationship with her sister. They hadn't spoken in 7 years. 7 years of silence, of resentment, of walls built so high neither could see over them anymore. I told her, before you call your sister, before you write that letter, you need to heal this in your mind first. And this is what Sarah did. Every night, for 21 days, she entered into a state of deep relaxation. She closed her eyes and imagined her sister sitting across from her. Not the bitter, angry sister she'd last seen, but the essence of her sister, the soul behind the hurt. In her mind's eye, Sarah spoke to her. She said things she'd never been able to say out loud. She apologized. She forgave. She listened to her sister's perspective without defensiveness. But here's the crucial part: she felt it. She didn't just visualize the words. She felt the warmth of reconciliation. She felt the embrace. She felt the tears of relief and joy. She felt the weight lifting from her chest, that terrible burden of years of separation dissolving like morning fog under the sun. And something extraordinary happened. On the 18th day of her practice, her phone rang. It was her sister. After 7 years of absolute silence, her sister called. And the first words out of her mouth were, I don't know why, but I've been thinking about you constantly. I feel like something has shifted. Can we talk? You see, Sarah hadn't sent a single text. She hadn't reached out through mutual friends. She hadn't done anything in the physical world. But she had done everything in the mental and spiritual realm. She had changed the vibration. She had healed the relationship in consciousness first, and the outer world had no choice but to conform to that inner reality. This is not magic. This is law, the law of mind. When you change your inner conversations, when you revise the past in your imagination, when you live from the end result in your feelings, the universe must respond. It has no choice. It's like changing the blueprint of a building. Once you change the blueprint, the building that gets constructed must be different. But most people never do this work. They wait for the other person to change. They wait for circumstances to improve. They wait for permission from the outer world to feel differently. And so, they wait forever, prisoners of their own mental patterns, victims of their own unexamined thoughts. But you were not meant to wait. You were not meant to be a passive observer of your own life, hoping that someday, somehow, things will magically change. The truth that transformed my entire existence is this: the universe responds to mental assumption, not to wishful hoping. It responds to the feeling of the wish fulfilled, not to the desperate plea of the one who lacks. Think about that distinction for a moment. When you hope for something, you are acknowledging its absence. When you wish for something, you are confessing that you don't have it. But when you assume something, when you mentally dwell in the state of already having it, you are impressing upon your subconscious mind a completely different instruction. Your subconscious mind cannot distinguish between a real experience and one vividly imagined with feeling. This is not metaphor. This is not poetry. This is psychological fact. When you imagine something with sufficient clarity and emotional intensity, your subconscious accepts it as real and begins to reorganize your entire mental and physical world to match that assumption. I learned this principle not from books alone, but from watching it unfold in my own life and in the lives of countless others who applied it. I've seen people transform their health by refusing to accept the verdict of circumstance. I've seen relationships healed by one person's decision to mentally dwell in the feeling of harmony rather than discord. I've seen financial miracles occur when someone finally stopped identifying with lack and began to assume the feeling of abundance. And I've seen the opposite. I've watched people with every external advantage sabotage themselves repeatedly because internally they felt unworthy. I've observed those who achieved great success only to lose it all because they never changed their inner conception of themselves. Your outer world is a perfect mirror of your inner assumptions. Not your wishes, not your hopes, your assumptions. The things you take for granted about yourself and your life. The things you believe so deeply you don't even question them anymore. These assumptions are the invisible architects of your reality. They are working right now, in this very moment, shaping what you will experience tomorrow, next week, next year. Let me give you an example. There's a man I once knew who assumed he was unlucky. Not dramatically unlucky, just consistently unfortunate. Small things would go wrong. He'd miss opportunities by minutes. He'd always pick the slowest checkout line, get caught in the rain without an umbrella. And he'd tell you, with absolute certainty, that's just how it is for me. But here's what was really happening. His assumption of being unlucky created a filter through which he experienced reality. When something went well, he barely noticed it. When something went wrong, it confirmed his belief. His subconscious mind was literally selecting evidence to prove his assumption correct. He wasn't experiencing bad luck, he was experiencing his assumption of bad luck. Now, imagine the opposite. Imagine a person who assumes, deep in their bones, that things work out for them. Not with arrogance or entitlement, but with a quiet, unshakable knowing that life supports them. Do you think these two people live in the same world? They don't. They can't. Because the world you experience is not the world as it is. It's the world as you assume it to be. This is where most people get stuck. They try to change their lives by changing their circumstances. They want a new job, a new relationship, a new bank account. And they work so hard to make these changes happen from the outside in. But the external world is only an echo. It's a reflection of your inner assumptions, and you cannot change a reflection by attacking the mirror. You must change what's being reflected. Your assumptions about money create your financial reality. Your assumptions about relationships create your romantic reality. Your assumptions about your capabilities create your professional reality. And the beautiful, terrifying truth is this: you can change any assumption at any time, no matter how long you've held it. The question is, will you? Most people won't. Because to change your assumptions, you must first become aware of them. And most of your assumptions are invisible to you. They're the water you swim in, the air you breathe. You don't consciously decide them every morning, you just live them. That's why people can do all the affirmations in the world and still not get results. Because underneath those affirmations, there's a deeper assumption running the show. And that assumption is what's actually creating your life. Let me show you what I mean. There's a woman who comes to me for advice. She's been saying affirmations for prosperity every single day. I am wealthy. Money flows to me easily. I deserve abundance. Beautiful words. She says them with feeling. She writes them in her journal. But here's what I notice when I talk to her. Every time an unexpected bill comes, she says, "Of course this happened." Every time she has to spend money, she winces. Every time someone talks about an expensive vacation, she immediately says, "Must be nice. Some of us have to work for a living." Do you see what's happening? Her affirmations say one thing, but her assumptions say another. And your assumptions always win. Because assumptions aren't what you say, they're what you expect, what you take for granted, what you consider normal. She expects money to be hard. She assumes she'll always have to struggle. That's her baseline, that's her water. So her subconscious mind, which is incredibly obedient, says, "Understood, you expect struggle. Let me create more situations that match that expectation." And it does. Brilliantly, consistently, without fail. This is why I keep saying, it's not about forcing yourself to believe something, it's about examining what you already believe, what you already assume to be true. Because those hidden assumptions are building your world right now, while you're listening to this, while you're nodding along, while you're thinking about your own life. Most people never question their assumptions. They defend them. They gather evidence for them. They surround themselves with people who share them. And then they wonder why nothing changes. But here's the thing that'll set you free. Assumptions can be changed. Not by fighting them, not by arguing with them, but by gently, persistently replacing them. You do this by catching yourself in the act, by noticing what you automatically assume, and then asking, is this assumption serving me? Is it true? Or is it just familiar? Because here's what I've observed time and time again. Familiarity masquerades as truth. We mistake the well-worn path for the right path. We confuse repetition with reality. Your father told you money doesn't grow on trees 5,000 times, so now when you see an opportunity, your mind automatically generates reasons why it won't work, not because those reasons are valid, but because that neural pathway is so deeply grooved that thoughts slide down it like water following the path of least resistance. You were criticized harshly as a child, so now you interpret neutral feedback as attack. You brace for impact in conversations where no blow is coming. Your assumption people are judging me harshly feels absolutely true in the moment. Your body responds with real stress hormones. Your heart rate increases, but the threat isn't in the room. It's in the assumption you're wearing like yesterday's clothes. This is why awareness alone is revolutionary. The moment you catch yourself mid-assumption and ask, wait, is this actually true, or is this just the story I always tell? In that moment, you've created a gap, a space, a possibility. And in that space, you can choose differently. You can choose a new assumption, not through force, not through willpower, but through gentle, consistent redirection, like training a puppy. The mind wanders into old assumption territory, and you gently guide it back. No, we're not going down that path today. Today we're trying on a different possibility. What if people actually want to help me? What if this meeting goes surprisingly well? What if my body knows how to heal? What if I'm more capable than I've given myself credit for? These aren't delusions. They're alternative assumptions. And here's the critical part. They're just as valid as the negative ones. Actually, often more valid, because they're not clouded by old trauma and childhood conditioning. So when you notice yourself making an assumption, and you will, constantly, ask yourself, what else could this mean? Just that simple question opens up space. It disrupts the automatic pathway your brain wants to take you down. Your boss walks past without saying good morning. Your brain immediately goes, he's angry at me, I'm getting fired. But what else could it mean? He's preoccupied with a personal issue. He didn't see you because he was reading an email. He's dealing with pressure from his superiors. He's having digestive problems and is rushing to the bathroom. There are literally dozens of explanations that have nothing to do with you. And here's what's fascinating. When you start doing this, when you start catching yourself and offering alternative explanations, something shifts in your neurology. You're literally rewiring the assumption circuits in your brain. You're teaching your nervous system that there's not just one story, there are many stories. And most of them are probably more accurate than the catastrophic one your trauma brain defaults to. I started practicing this religiously. Every single time I caught myself in a negative assumption, I forced myself to generate at least 3 alternative explanations. At first, it felt mechanical, forced. My brain would roll its eyes at me. Yeah, sure, maybe he's just busy, but we both know he hates me. But I kept doing it anyway. And gradually, something remarkable happened. The grip of those automatic negative assumptions began to loosen. They didn't disappear. I'm not going to lie to you and say I'm cured. But they lost their absolute authority over me. They became suggestions rather than commandments. And in that space between stimulus and assumption, I found something precious: choice. The freedom to decide what story I wanted to believe. Not based on childhood wounds or past rejections, but based on present evidence and rational probability. This is where the power lives. Not in never making assumptions, that's impossible, but in recognizing them as assumptions rather than facts, in holding them lightly rather than clutching them like gospel truth. And when you hold assumptions lightly, something remarkable happens. You become curious instead of certain. You start asking questions instead of making pronouncements. You listen to understand rather than to confirm what you already believe. I've watched this transformation countless times. Someone walks into a situation absolutely convinced they know what's happening. Their mind has already written the script. And then, because they're holding their assumptions lightly, they notice something that doesn't fit, a detail that contradicts their narrative. And instead of dismissing it, instead of explaining it away, they pause, they get curious. Wait, they think, maybe I don't have the full picture here. That pause is everything. That moment of curiosity is where wisdom begins. Because here's what most people don't understand about assumptions. They're not just thoughts in your head, they're filters through which you see reality. They determine what you notice and what you ignore, what you consider possible and what you dismiss as impossible. When you assume someone is incompetent, you see every mistake as confirmation. When you assume they're brilliant, you see those same mistakes as anomalies or learning moments. The behavior is identical. Your interpretation creates two completely different realities. And you're doing this all day, every day, with everything and everyone you encounter. You're not seeing the world as it is. You're seeing the world as your assumptions say it is. Think about that for a moment. Really let it sink in. You're walking through life wearing glasses you don't even know you have on. And those glasses are tinted by your past experiences, your fears, your hopes, your insecurities, your biases. Everything you see is colored by assumptions you made years ago, assumptions you've never questioned, assumptions you've forgotten, or even assumptions. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and instantly you know they're a terrible person, a selfish driver, someone who doesn't care about anyone else. That's your assumption. But you have no idea what's actually happening in that car. Maybe they just got a call that their child is in the hospital. Maybe they're terrified and not thinking clearly. Maybe they didn't even see you. You don't know. You can't know. But your assumption creates your emotional reality in that moment. And here's the critical insight most people miss completely. Your nervous system doesn't wait for confirmation. It doesn't sit there analyzing evidence. It responds instantly to the story you're telling yourself right now. Think about that. Your body is already flooding with cortisol or oxytocin based purely on your assumption. Your muscles are tensing or relaxing. Your breathing is becoming shallow or deep. Your heart rate is accelerating or calming all before you have a single fact. This is why two people can experience the exact same event and have completely opposite physical and emotional responses. One person sees their partner talking to a stranger and assumes friendship, feels warm, feels secure. Another person sees the identical interaction and assumes betrayal, feels panic, feels rage. Same reality, different assumption, entirely different biological experience. And here's where it gets even more profound. Your assumption doesn't just create your internal state, it creates your perception of evidence. It literally determines what you see and what you ignore. When you assume someone is against you, you will find proof everywhere. A neutral comment becomes an insult. A moment of silence becomes rejection. An honest mistake becomes sabotage. Your mind becomes a detective working backwards from a conclusion, gathering evidence to support what you've already decided is true. But when you assume someone is for you, that same neutral comment becomes encouragement. That silence becomes peaceful respect. That mistake becomes human and forgivable. You're not discovering truth. You're creating the lens through which truth appears to you. I've watched this pattern destroy relationships, careers, and lives. not because of what actually happened, but because of the assumption that was made about what happened. The assumption became the filter determined the evidence reinforced the assumption. And the cycle spiraled until the person was absolutely convinced their negative assumption was objective reality. They'll swear to you, "I'm not assuming anything, I'm just seeing what's really there." But they're not. Nobody is. We're all seeing through the lens of our assumptions, and most of us don't even know we're wearing glasses. Let me tell you about Sarah. She came to one of my lectures years ago, sat in the back row with her arms crossed. After the session, she approached me with this challenge in her eyes. "I don't buy it," she said. "I'm a realist. I see things as they are, not as I want them to be." I asked her a simple question. "When you walk into a room, what do you notice first?" "Problems," she said without hesitation. "Things that are wrong. Things that need fixing." "And do you think that's reality?" I asked. "Or is that what you've trained yourself to see?" She paused. Nobody had ever asked her that before. Here's what I told her, and what I'm telling you now. The human brain processes 11 million bits of information every second. 11 million. But your conscious mind can only handle about 40 bits per second. That means you're filtering out 99.99999% of reality at any given moment. So when you say you're seeing reality, what you're actually seeing is a tiny, highly curated selection that your subconscious has chosen for you based on your existing beliefs and patterns. Sarah believed she was a problem finder, so her brain, being the obedient servant it is, spent all day finding problems to show her. She'd walk past 20 things going right to spot the one thing going wrong, and then she'd say, "See, I'm just being realistic." But here's what happened when she started to shift her assumption. She didn't become a Pollyanna, didn't start pretending problems didn't exist. She simply decided to assume that solutions were just as abundant as problems, that opportunities were hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone who expected to find them. Within 3 months, her entire career transformed. Not because the world changed, but because she started noticing different data from the same environment. The opportunities were always there. She just wasn't tuned to that frequency. Your assumptions are like a radio dial. They determine what station you're picking up. And most people are stuck on the same station their parents listened to, wondering why they keep hearing the same old songs. But here's what I need you to grasp with absolute clarity. You can change the dial at any moment, right now, today. This isn't some distant possibility requiring years of therapy or a complete life overhaul. This is immediate. The power is in your hands this very second. I've watched this happen countless times. A person walks into my office carrying a burden they've hauled around for 20 years. Their shoulders are literally slumped from the weight of it. They tell me their story with such conviction, such absolute certainty about how things are and how they'll always be, and I listen. I always listen. Because buried in that story, beneath all the assumptions and conclusions they've drawn, is the truth they haven't yet seen. There was a woman who came to me convinced she was incapable of prosperity. She had evidence. Oh, did she have evidence? Every job she'd taken paid barely enough to survive. Every opportunity seemed to slip through her fingers at the last moment. Her bank account was a source of constant anxiety. She'd done everything right on the surface, worked hard, saved when she could, made sensible choices, but nothing ever changed. We talked for over an hour that first session, and gradually the real story emerged. When she was 7 years old, her mother had pulled her aside after a neighborhood girl got a new bicycle. Her mother said, "People like us don't get things like that. We're not that kind of family." 6 words, spoken once. And this woman had been living inside those 6 words for 33 years. That assumption had become her radio station. Every frequency she tuned into played variations of the same message. You're not that kind of person. Opportunities would present themselves, and unconsciously, she'd sabotage them. Not because she was lazy or stupid or cursed, but because deep down, accepting abundance would mean betraying her mother's worldview. It would mean admitting her mother was wrong. And that felt like losing her family, her identity, her place in the world. This is why breaking free from inherited beliefs is so painful. It's not just about changing your mind, it's about separating your sense of self from the people who raised you. It's about standing in your own truth even when it contradicts everything your family stands for. And your subconscious knows this. It feels the danger. So it protects you the only way it knows how, by sabotaging your success, by keeping you small, by making sure you never have to face that impossible choice between your dreams and your family's love. I've watched people work themselves to exhaustion trying to change their lives through willpower alone. They read every book. They take every course. They push and strive and force themselves forward. And still, nothing changes. Because they're trying to build a mansion on a foundation that was designed for a shack. You cannot out-hustle your subconscious programming. You cannot outwork beliefs that were installed before you could even speak. The conscious mind is powerful, yes, but the subconscious is an ocean, and your willpower is just a rowboat trying to cross it. This is why affirmations fail for most people. They stand in front of the mirror saying, "I am wealthy, I am successful, I am confident," while their subconscious is screaming, "Liar, fraud, who do you think you are?" The affirmation bounces off the surface like a stone skipping across water, never penetrating deep enough to create real change. The subconscious doesn't respond to words alone. It responds to feeling, to emotion, to the state of consciousness behind the words. You can say "I am wealthy" 1,000 times, but if beneath those words is fear, doubt, and unworthiness, you're actually reinforcing the very beliefs you're trying to change. I learned this the hard way. For years, I tried to change my life through positive thinking alone. I would repeat affirmations, visualize success, tell myself empowering stories, and sometimes it worked for a little while. I'd have a breakthrough, a moment of clarity, a surge of confidence. But then, inevitably, I'd slide back. The old patterns would reassert themselves. The familiar struggles would return. It was like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. I could do it with effort, with concentration, with constant vigilance. But the moment I relaxed, the moment my attention wavered, it would shoot back to the surface. The fatigue became overwhelming. I was exhausted not from pursuing my dreams but from running away from my fears. Every morning I woke up already tired from the battles I'd been fighting in my sleep. My subconscious was working overtime, trying to process all the resistance I was creating during my waking hours. And here's what nobody tells you about this kind of resistance. It doesn't just affect the specific thing you're resisting. It spreads. It metastasizes. When you're in a constant state of pushing against what you don't want, you create a pattern of resistance that touches everything in your life. I found myself resistant to joy, resistant to compliments, resistant to opportunities. Not because I consciously wanted to reject these things, but because my entire nervous system had been trained to be in opposition mode. I had become someone whose default setting was no, when life was offering me yes. The real breakthrough came when I stopped trying to control my thoughts entirely and started working with a different principle. Instead of fighting against the negative, I began to gently redirect my attention toward what I actually wanted, not with force, not with desperation, but with the kind of gentle persistence you might use to train a puppy. When the thought of failure appeared, instead of battling it, I would simply say, "Thank you for trying to protect me, but I'm going to focus on this instead." And I would turn my attention to the feeling of success, to the vision of my desired outcome, to the emotional state I wanted to embody. At first, this felt impossibly difficult. My mind would snap back to the negative like a rubber band. But I kept at it. Not perfectly, not even consistently at first. But I kept practicing this gentle redirection. And something remarkable began to happen. Within a few weeks, I noticed something extraordinary. The thoughts that used to grab me and pull me under, they started to lose their grip. It's like, imagine you're watching a movie that used to terrify you. The first time, you're on the edge of your seat, heart pounding. But the 10th time, you know it's just a movie. The images are the same, but they don't have the same power over you. That's what happened with my anxious thoughts. They still showed up, thoughts about failure, rejection, embarrassment, but they didn't hook me the way they used to. I could watch them pass through my mind like clouds crossing the sky. There, but not defining the entire atmosphere of my inner world. And here's where it gets really interesting. As I became less reactive to negative thoughts, I started to notice the positive ones more. You know how when you decide you want a red car, Suddenly you see red cars everywhere. They were always there. You just weren't paying attention to them. The same thing happened in my mind. I'd catch myself thinking, I handled that well, or that was a good conversation, or I'm actually pretty good at this. These thoughts had probably always been there, floating around in my consciousness, but I'd been so focused on the negative soundtrack that I'd completely filtered them out. The inner critic didn't disappear. I want to be really clear about that because I think it's important. The voice was still there, but I was no longer its captive audience. It was like having a radio playing in the background. You can hear it, but you're not hanging on every word. You've got the remote, and you can choose what to pay attention to. My relationships started to shift too. When you're not constantly bracing for judgment or criticism, when you're not hearing that harsh internal commentary all day long, you show up differently with people. I became more present, more generous, more willing to be vulnerable, because I wasn't spending all my energy managing my inner tyrant. My relationships deepened in ways I hadn't thought possible. I started noticing things I'd missed for years, the way my partner's eyes lit up when talking about something they loved, the quiet generosity of a friend who always remembered small details. I'd been too busy listening to my own internal prosecution to really see the people around me. And here's something that surprised me. People actually liked me more. Not because I changed who I was fundamentally, but because I stopped apologizing for existing. That anxious energy I used to carry, that constant need for reassurance, that tendency to over-explain everything, it melted away. I became easier to be around because I was easier on myself. The work performance thing is real too, but not in the way those toxic productivity gurus talk about it. I didn't suddenly start working 18-hour days or crushing my goals. Instead, I stopped sabotaging myself with perfectionism. I could finish projects instead of endlessly revising them. I could share ideas in meetings without rehearsing them 40 times in my head first. I took creative risks because the potential reward became more interesting than the fear of criticism. But the deepest shift? I started trusting myself again. That's what constant self-criticism steals from you, your ability to trust your own judgment, your instincts, your decisions. When you're always second-guessing yourself, you live in this exhausting state of perpetual uncertainty. Should I say this? Was that the right call? Did I mess everything up? When I stopped attacking myself, I rediscovered something I'd lost, the quiet confidence that comes from self-trust. Not arrogance, not delusion, just the simple ability to make a decision and move forward without torturing myself about it for 3 days afterward. I could finally distinguish between my intuition and my anxiety. Before, they were so tangled up with self-criticism that I couldn't tell which voice was which. Is this a genuine concern, or just my inner critic finding another angle of attack? Once I established that baseline of self-compassion, my actual instincts became clearer. I could hear them again. And yes, I still make mistakes. But now they're just information, just part of learning. They're not evidence in the case against my fundamental worthiness as a human being. Because here's what I finally understood. Your subconscious doesn't distinguish between past, present, and future the way your conscious mind does. When you keep replaying past mistakes, your subconscious experiences them as current reality. It's like watching the same horror movie every night and wondering why you can't sleep peacefully. I had a pattern for years where I'd lie in bed replaying conversations, rewriting what I should have said, analyzing every awkward moment. I thought I was learning from my mistakes, but what I was actually doing was programming my subconscious to believe I was perpetually inadequate in social situations. The subconscious takes your repeated thoughts as instructions. When you replay failure, you're essentially saying, "This is who I am. Remember this. Expect more of this." Your subconscious, being the faithful servant it is, says, "Got it. Inadequate and awkward. I'll make sure we're prepared for that scenario in the future." So what changed for me? I started a different practice. Instead of replaying what went wrong, I began replaying what I wanted to go right. Not as fantasy or denial, but as instruction. Before any important conversation or event, I'd spend 5 minutes imagining it going well. Not perfectly, that feels fake to the subconscious, but well. I'd see myself calm, articulate, present. I'd feel the confidence in my body. At first, it felt like pretending, like I was lying to myself. But then I realized something crucial. Your subconscious doesn't know the difference between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. That's not wishful thinking, that's neuroscience. When you visualize something with emotional intensity, your brain creates neural pathways as if the experience actually happened. Athletes have known this forever. They don't just practice physically, they practice mentally. They see the perfect shot, the flawless performance, over and over, until their subconscious knows exactly what to do when the moment comes. You can do the same thing with any area of your life. Want to be more confident in meetings? Stop replaying the meeting where you fumbled. Start previewing meetings where you contribute valuable insights. Want better relationships? Stop reviewing every argument. Start envisioning conversations where you communicate with clarity and compassion. You want financial abundance? Stop checking your bank account with dread. Start seeing it grow. Start feeling the relief that comes with stability. Every time you catch yourself rehashing the past, you're making a choice. You're choosing to feed the wrong wolf. And here's what most people don't understand: the past only has power because you keep giving it your attention. Your attention is currency. It's the most valuable thing you possess. Where you invest it determines the quality of your entire existence. Think about this. Advertisers spend billions trying to capture seconds of your attention because they understand its value. Yet you're giving hours of it away for free to memories that drain you, to conversations that are over, to versions of yourself that no longer exist. That's not just wasteful, it's tragic. I've watched people transform their entire lives by making one simple shift. They stopped being historians of their pain and became architects of their future. They stopped narrating what went wrong and started scripting what could go right. And the results? Nothing short of miraculous. One woman came to me unable to sleep. Every night, her mind would replay a business failure from 3 years prior. Every conversation she mishandled. Every decision she regretted. She was losing weight. Her health was deteriorating. Her relationships were suffering. I told her what I'm telling you now. I said, every night before sleep, when your mind wants to review that failure, I want you to imagine instead the success you're building now. See yourself confident, capable, thriving, feel it, live it in your imagination. She resisted at first. She said, but I need to learn from what happened. I need to understand my mistakes. I said, you've reviewed it 1,000 times. What new lesson are you discovering on review 1001? You've learned everything that failure had to teach you. Now it's just punishment. That landed. She understood. Within 3 weeks, she was sleeping through the night. Within 3 months, she'd launched a new venture. Within a year, she'd exceeded everything she'd lost in that previous failure. Not because she forgot the past, but because she stopped living in it. The past is a graveyard, but we keep bringing flowers. We keep tending to graves that should have long been left behind. And here's what most people don't understand: your subconscious doesn't know the difference between a memory and a present reality. When you replay that argument from 3 years ago, your body responds as if it's happening right now. Your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, stress hormones flood your system. You're literally poisoning yourself with phantoms. I've watched people age decades in a matter of years because they couldn't release what was already gone. They carry conversations that ended, relationships that dissolved, opportunities that passed. And with every replay, they reinforce the neural pathways that keep them trapped. The brain is remarkably efficient. It strengthens the connections you use most often. If you spend your days rehearsing regret, you become a master of regret. If you spend your nights replaying rejection, you become fluent in the language of unworthiness. But here's the truth that can set you free. You have the power right now, in this present moment, to break that cycle. Not tomorrow. Not after you've healed completely, not when you feel ready. Right now. There was a veteran I worked with who'd been carrying the weight of combat for 15 years. Every night, the same scenes. Every morning, the same heaviness. He tried everything: medication, therapy, meditation. Nothing seemed to touch the core of it. Until one session, I asked him a simple question: what are you getting from holding on to this? He looked at me like I'd slapped him. Getting from it, I'm getting pain, I'm getting nightmares, I'm getting a life I can barely function in. Then why are you choosing it every single day? The silence that followed was profound. Because in that moment, he realized something fundamental. Continuation requires choice, even unconscious continuation. His mind had created a pattern, and he was feeding it with his attention, his emotional energy, his constant revisiting. The breakthrough came on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon. He was sitting in his car in the parking lot of a grocery store, and for the 100th time that week, the memory began to surface. But this time, instead of letting it play out, instead of arguing with it or trying to push it away, he did something different. He observed it. Not as a participant, but as a witness. He watched his mind reach for the familiar groove, watched the emotional response begin to build, watched the mental justifications start to form. And in that space of observation, he realized he had a choice. Not whether the memory would appear that was automatic, conditioned by months of repetition, but whether he would feed it with his attention, whether he would believe the narrative it offered, whether he would let it define his present moment. He chose differently, not through force or willpower, but through simple recognition. This is a thought pattern, he said to himself. This is my mind running a familiar program. But I am not this program, I am the awareness that observes it. The memory didn't vanish. The emotional echo was still there, but something had shifted. He had stopped identifying with it. He had stopped believing that the continued presence of this pattern meant anything about his worth, his future, or his reality. And in the days that followed, something remarkable happened. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually, the pattern began to lose its power. It was like a fire that had been burning for months, suddenly being deprived of fuel. It didn't extinguish immediately, but it began to die down. Because continuation, he discovered, isn't a passive state. It's an active process that requires our participation. Every time we revisit a memory with emotional intensity, every time we rehearse a narrative, every time we identify with a thought pattern, we're voting for its continuation. We're telling our subconscious mind, yes, this is important. Keep this alive. Make this my reality. And here's what happens in the silence after prayer. Your subconscious doesn't argue, it doesn't debate, it doesn't question whether you deserve it or whether it's possible. It simply accepts the impression you've given it and goes to work making it real. This is why persistence in prayer isn't about begging. It's not about convincing God to change his mind. It's about impressing your subconscious mind so deeply that it has no choice but to express what you've planted. Think of a farmer planting seeds. Does he plant them once and then dig them up every day to see if they're growing? Of course not. He plants them, waters them, and trusts the process. He doesn't stand over the field demanding instant results. Your subconscious mind works the same way. You plant the seed through prayer, you water it through repetition and feeling, and you trust the creative power within you to bring it forth. But most people do the opposite. They pray once, then spend the rest of the day digging up the seed with doubt. Is it working? I don't see anything yet. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. Maybe it's not meant to be. Each time you doubt, you're uprooting the seed before it can take hold. Each time you worry, you're watering the weeds of fear instead of the flowers of faith. Persistence means you keep returning to the feeling, not because God needs convincing, but because your subconscious needs consistent direction. It needs to know, this is what we're focusing on. This is the reality we're creating. I once worked with a woman who wanted to heal a chronic illness that doctors had given up on. She came to me desperate, searching for a miracle. I told her what I'm telling you now. The miracle isn't out there. It's already within you. Your subconscious mind, connected to infinite intelligence, has the power to heal anything. But she had to persist in the feeling of perfect health. Not occasionally. Not when she felt like it. Every single day, multiple times a day, she had to enter that state of consciousness where she was already whole and well. At first, she struggled. Her body was giving her pain signals constantly, reminding her of the illness. But she learned to use those moments as reminders to return to her prayer, to her vision of health. Within just a few weeks, something remarkable began to happen. The pain that had been constant started to have gaps, moments where she felt normal. Then those moments became hours. Her doctors were astonished when her next tests came back. The inflammation markers in her blood had dropped significantly. The disease that was supposed to be incurable was retreating. Within 6 months, she was in complete remission. The medical team had no explanation. They called it spontaneous remission, a miracle, a statistical anomaly. But you and I know what really happened. She changed the image impressed on her subconscious mind, and her body had no choice but to follow. Now, I want you to understand something crucial here. This woman didn't deny her illness. She didn't pretend the pain wasn't real. She acknowledged where she was, but she refused to accept it as her permanent reality. There's a massive difference between denial and faith. Denial says, "This isn't happening." Faith says, "This is happening, but it's not the end of the story." Your subconscious mind is always listening to the story you're telling. And here's what most people don't realize. It doesn't distinguish between a story about the past, the present, or the future. It simply accepts what you repeatedly impress upon it and works to make it your reality. Think about worry for a moment. What is worry but negative prayer? When you worry, you're vividly imagining something you don't want. You're feeling the emotions of that unwanted outcome. You're repeating it mentally again and again. And your subconscious says, "Oh, this must be important. They keep thinking about it. They're feeling it deeply. This must be what they want." And it begins to orchestrate circumstances to bring that very thing into your experience. So understand what's happening here. Your subconscious doesn't argue with you. It doesn't say, "Oh, you don't really mean that." It doesn't filter based on morality or logic or what's good for you. It simply accepts. It takes the impression, it takes the feeling, and it begins to work. This is why people who constantly worry about illness often find themselves sick. This is why people who obsess over failure tend to fail, not because the universe is punishing them, not because they're cursed, but because they've given their subconscious mind a blueprint, and that faithful servant is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's manifesting the pattern they've impressed upon it. Now, here's where this gets absolutely crucial. Most people think they can fool their subconscious mind. They think they can say one thing while feeling another. They think they can affirm abundance while their stomach is tied in knots with anxiety about money. They think they can declare confidence while their body language screams insecurity. It doesn't work that way. Your subconscious responds to feeling, to conviction, to the actual state of consciousness you embody, not the words you mechanically repeat. You can say, "I am wealthy" 10,000 times, but if every time you say it, you feel fraudulent, if you feel like you're lying, if there's that sinking feeling of, "Who am I kidding?" then you're not impressing wealth into your subconscious. You're impressing doubt. You're impressing lack. You're impressing the feeling of pretending to be something you're not. This is the mistake so many people make with affirmations. They treat them like magic spells. They think the words themselves have power. The words don't have power. The feeling behind the words has power. The state of consciousness you enter when you speak has power. An affirmation spoken with conviction, with feeling, with the acceptance that it is already true that transforms your consciousness. That impresses your subconscious. That changes everything. But an affirmation spoken mechanically, spoken from desperation, spoken while you're simultaneously thinking, "This isn't working," that does nothing. Worse than nothing. It reinforces the very state you're trying to change. Your subconscious doesn't respond to your words. It responds to the feeling behind your words, the conviction, the acceptance. This is why I always say, it's not the affirmation that has power, it's the state of consciousness from which you affirm. Let me give you something practical. When you want to impress your subconscious mind with a desire, with a new belief, you must first enter into a state of receptivity. You cannot barge into your subconscious with demands. You cannot force it. You woo it. You seduce it with feeling. This is where most people go wrong. They treat prayer like a battering ram. They treat affirmations like a verbal assault. They repeat, repeat, repeat with clenched teeth, with frustration, with anxiety, and then they wonder why nothing changes. Here's what works: relaxation, quietness, a gentle, drowsy state where the conscious mind steps aside and the subconscious becomes impressionable. This is why I recommend practicing your mental work just before sleep, or just upon waking. In those liminal moments, your critical mind is soft, your defenses are down, the subconscious is wide open. You lie down, you close your eyes, You take a few deep breaths and let your body sink into the mattress. And then, gently, quietly, you begin to assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Not the words, the feeling. You imagine how you would feel if your desire were already a fact. You don't visualize it happening in the future. You feel it as present, as done, as real. If you want health, you don't say, I will be healthy. You feel healthy now. You imagine the vitality flowing through your body. You sense the ease, the strength, the well-being. You let that feeling saturate you until it becomes more real than your current symptoms. If you want financial security, you don't affirm, money is coming to me. You feel the relief, the freedom, the confidence of already having what you need. You imagine the comfort of knowing your bills are paid, your future is secure. You rest in that feeling. This is the secret. Feeling is the secret. Not thought alone. Not words alone. Feeling wedded to thought. Emotion wedded to belief. That is what moves the subconscious. That is what brings about change. You see, the subconscious mind doesn't argue with you. It doesn't debate. It doesn't say, well, I'm not sure that's logical. It accepts, it receives. It acts upon whatever is impressed upon it with feeling and conviction. This is why two people can use the same affirmation, the same prayer, the same technique, and one will experience miraculous results while the other experiences nothing at all. The difference isn't in the words. The difference is in the feeling behind the words. I remember a woman who came to me years ago, desperate for healing. She had been affirming health for months. Every morning, every evening, she would stand before her mirror and declare, I am healthy, I am whole, I am strong, yet nothing changed. Her condition persisted. When I listened to her speak these words, I understood immediately. Her voice was hollow, her eyes were filled with doubt. She was speaking the words, but her heart was screaming the opposite message. She was affirming health while feeling sick. She was declaring wholeness while believing in her illness. I said to her, you must stop this mechanical repetition. You are impressing the wrong thing upon your subconscious. Every time you say I am healthy while feeling the fear of sickness, you are actually reinforcing the sickness. We changed her approach entirely. Instead of affirming health while standing in her present condition, I taught her to enter into a state of deep relaxation. In that peaceful state, I guided her to imagine herself already healed. Not trying to heal, not hoping to heal, already healed. I had her see herself doing the things she would do when well. I had her feel the joy she would feel, the freedom, the energy. I had her live from the end result, not from her current circumstances. And within weeks, the transformation began. The same woman who had affirmed for months with no results now began to see dramatic changes in her health. Why? Because now she was feeling the reality of her healing. Now she was emotionally aligned with her desire. This is the secret that changes everything. You see, most people approach their desires from a place of desperation. They pray from lack. They affirm from emptiness. They visualize while simultaneously feeling the pain of not having. And this divided consciousness, this emotional contradiction, is exactly what keeps their good away from them. I've counseled thousands of individuals over the years, and the pattern is always the same. They come to me saying, I've been affirming for months, but nothing happens. When I ask them how they feel when they affirm, they admit, anxious, doubtful, frustrated. They're speaking words of abundance while radiating feelings of scarcity. This is like planting seeds while simultaneously pulling them up to check if they're growing. The subconscious mind responds to feeling, not to words alone. You can repeat, I am wealthy 10,000 times, but if you feel poor while saying it, you're impressing poverty upon your subconscious, not wealth. Let me share another case that demonstrates this principle beautifully. A young musician came to see me, desperate to break into the industry. He had talent, he had drive, but every door seemed closed to him. He'd been affirming success for 2 years with no results. I asked him to describe his mental state when he affirmed. Well, he said, I say I am a successful musician, but honestly, I feel like I'm lying to myself. I look around at my tiny apartment, my empty calendar, my bank account, and the words feel hollow. There was the problem, laid bare. He was affirming one thing but feeling its opposite. His consciousness was split, and a house divided against itself cannot stand. I explained to him what I'm explaining to you now. You must feel the reality of your desire before it manifests physically. I showed him a simple technique. I said, before you sleep tonight, construct a scene that implies your business is thriving. Don't visualize the struggle. Don't imagine the process of trying to make sales. Imagine the end result. See yourself depositing a large check at the bank. Feel the weight of success. Hear your accountant congratulating you on an exceptional quarter. He looked skeptical, but something in his eyes told me he was desperate enough to try anything. I continued, when you enter that scene in your imagination, you must enter it completely. You cannot be a spectator watching yourself succeed. You must be in the first person, looking through your own eyes, feeling what you would feel if it were real right now. This is where most people fail, you see. They create beautiful mental movies, but they watch them from the outside, as if they're viewing someone else's life. That creates separation. That creates the feeling of, it's not mine yet. But when you step into the scene, when you see through the eyes of the person who already has what you desire, everything changes. The man called me 3 weeks later. His voice was different, lighter, excited. 2 major contracts had come through seemingly out of nowhere. Old clients who had disappeared suddenly returned with larger orders. A competitor went out of business, and their customers came to him. He said it felt like the universe had suddenly conspired in his favor. But here's what really happened. His universe, his consciousness had shifted. The outer world merely rearranged itself to match his inner conviction. You see, your consciousness is the only reality. Everything else is a reflection, a shadow cast by the light of your awareness. When you truly accept this, when you stop fighting against your circumstances and start building from within, you become a conscious creator rather than a helpless victim. The circumstances that once seemed like solid, immovable walls begin to dissolve like mist in the morning sun. This understanding changes everything about how you approach your daily life. Instead of waking up and immediately checking what the world is telling you, the news, the bills, the problems, you begin with consciousness. You start your day by recognizing that before anything appears in your experience, you must first be aware of it. And if you are the awareness that gives reality to all things, then you hold the power to change what appears. I've watched people transform their entire existence by simply shifting this one fundamental perspective. A woman came to me years ago, drowning in debt, her marriage crumbling, her health failing. She had tried everything: budgeting, counseling, doctors, all the external solutions. Nothing worked because she was treating her circumstances as the cause rather than the effect. When she finally grasped that her awareness was primary, that the debt was not the problem but merely the outward expression of an inner state of lack, everything shifted. She stopped fighting the debt and started building inner abundance. She stopped trying to fix her marriage and started embodying love within herself. She stopped battling her symptoms and started assuming the feeling of perfect health. Within 6 months, opportunities for income appeared that she could never have predicted. Her husband, responding to her completely transformed energy, began to change as well. Her health improved so dramatically that her doctors were baffled. This wasn't magic. This wasn't luck. This was the law, the immutable principle that consciousness is the only reality. When she changed what she was aware of being, her entire world had no choice but to reorganize itself around that new awareness. The circumstances that seemed so solid, so permanent, so real, they dissolved because they had never been real in the first place. They were only real to the degree that her consciousness gave them reality. And this is where most people stumble. They intellectually understand that consciousness is primary, but they continue to give their attention, their belief, their emotional energy to the circumstances. They say they believe consciousness creates reality, but then they spend 18 hours a day focused on what already is, complaining about it, analyzing it, trying to manipulate it from the outside. That is like trying to change your reflection by painting the mirror. The reflection has no independent existence. It is entirely dependent on what stands before the mirror. And what stands before the mirror of the world is your consciousness, your habitual mental state, your inner conversations, the beliefs you rehearse moment by moment. I want you to really let this land. Your circumstances right now are nothing more than a perfect reflection of where your consciousness has habitually been dwelling. Not where you say it is, not where you wish it were, but where it actually lives most of the time. Your bank account reflects your consciousness of wealth or lack. Your relationships reflect your consciousness of love or loneliness. Your health reflects your consciousness of vitality or disease. The entire three-dimensional world you walk through is nothing but consciousness pushed out, crystallized into form. And here is where it gets interesting, where most people stumble even after understanding this intellectually. They try to use this knowledge as a technique, as a method to manipulate reality. They say, okay, if consciousness creates reality, then I will think positive thoughts about money and it will come. So they sit down and they force themselves to think about wealth for 10 minutes. Then they open their eyes, check their phone, look at their bank balance, and there it is, unchanged. And immediately the doubt floods in. See? This doesn't work. I tried. But what actually happened? They did not shift consciousness. They performed a mental exercise while their actual consciousness, their real state of being, remained absolutely unchanged. The moment they finished their 10-minute practice, they returned immediately to their habitual dwelling place, the consciousness of lack, of waiting, of not having. All day long they checked and worried and wondered when it would show up. That is where they truly lived. That is the consciousness that materialized. Your world on the outside is nothing more than a printout of the world you've been hosting on the inside. And here's the difficult truth nobody wants to hear. You cannot fake this. You cannot pretend your way into manifestation. You cannot sit and worry and slap affirmations on top of it like band-aids on a wound and expect miracles. Your subconscious mind doesn't respond to what you say. It responds to what you feel as true. I've watched people recite affirmations 1,000 times while their stomach churns with doubt. They speak words of abundance while their chest tightens with fear. They declare prosperity while their mind races through catastrophic scenarios. And then they wonder why nothing changes. Let me be direct with you. The subconscious mind accepts the dominant emotion, not the decorative words. If you say I am wealthy but you feel poor, you are not impressing wealth upon your subconscious. You are impressing poverty dressed in wealthy vocabulary. And poverty is what will manifest, every single time. This is why feeling is the secret. This is why assumption must be accompanied by the feeling of the wish fulfilled. This is why I have told you again and again, live in the end. Living in the end doesn't mean thinking about the end. It means inhabiting it emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. It means you close your eyes and you don't visualize yourself happy in the future. You feel happy now, as though it has already happened. When you pray, do you beg or do you give thanks? Begging is the prayer of lack. Thanksgiving is the prayer of receiving. The person who begs says, please God, send me money, I don't have enough, I'm desperate, I need help. The person who gives thanks says, thank you for the abundance that is mine, thank you for the wealth that flows to me now. One prays from emptiness, the other prays from fullness. Which prayer do you think the subconscious mind, the God within you, honors? The subconscious does not respond to need. It responds to conviction. It does not answer desperation. It answers belief. When you pray with gratitude, you are not lying to yourself. You are not pretending. You are recognizing a truth that exists beyond your present circumstances. You are claiming what is already yours in the invisible realm of mind and bringing it into the visible realm of experience. Listen carefully to this. Your present condition is not your reality. Your present condition is simply the outpicturing of your past thinking. It is old news. It is yesterday's mental diet made manifest. But right now, in this very moment, you can begin to think differently. And when you think differently with feeling, with conviction, with faith, you set into motion new causes that must produce new effects. I have seen this principle work in the most desperate situations. A woman came to me once, ill with a disease the doctors had given up on. She had been praying for months, begging for healing, crying out for mercy, and she only grew weaker. I told her to stop praying that way immediately. Instead, I gave her a simple practice. Every night before sleep, she was to feel herself healthy, to imagine her doctor congratulating her on her recovery, to thank God for her perfect, radiant health. At first, she protested. She said it felt like a lie. Her body was deteriorating. How could she thank God for health she did not have? But I explained to her what I'm explaining to you now. She was not giving thanks for her sickness. She was giving thanks for the health that was hers by divine right, that existed already in consciousness, that was waiting to be made manifest through her acceptance of it. She agreed to try. Night after night, she practiced this mental discipline. She stopped dwelling on her symptoms. She stopped talking about her disease. She gave thanks. And within weeks, the symptoms began to reverse. Within months, her doctors were astonished. They called it spontaneous remission. I called it the law of mind in action. But here's what most people miss about this kind of transformation. It doesn't happen in isolation. When you change your inner conversation, you change your entire world. Every relationship shifts. Every opportunity realigns. Every circumstance bends to accommodate your new mental dwelling place. I've watched this principle operate in the most practical areas of life. A man came to me struggling with what he called terrible luck in business. Every venture he started seemed to collapse just as it was gaining momentum. He'd invested in 3 different enterprises over 5 years, and each one had failed spectacularly. When I asked him to describe what happened before each failure, a pattern emerged that was so obvious it was almost laughable. Weeks before each collapse, he would tell his wife, his friends, anyone who would listen, "This is too good to be true. Something's going to go wrong. It always does." He was literally programming his subconscious mind for failure, then acting shocked when it delivered exactly what he ordered. His conscious desire for success meant nothing compared to his subconscious conviction that he was destined to fail. I gave him a specific assignment. Every morning and every night, he was to speak to his subconscious as though it were a faithful servant awaiting instructions. "I am a successful businessman. Everything I touch prospers. I am divinely guided to right action and right decisions. My enterprises flourish and grow." At first, his conscious mind rebelled. It felt like lying. But I reminded him of something crucial. Your subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. When you repeat something with feeling and conviction, your subconscious accepts it as fact and begins to manifest it in your external world. Within 18 months, he had built a business that surpassed anything he'd attempted before. But the business success wasn't even the most remarkable change. His health improved, his marriage deepened. His children became more responsive and affectionate. And most importantly, he discovered something profound. The man in the mirror wasn't his enemy. He was his greatest ally, waiting patiently to be acknowledged and engaged. This is the principle I want you to grasp completely. Your subconscious mind is recording everything. It's watching how you speak to yourself in those private moments. It's listening to the tone you use when you think no one can hear, and it responds accordingly. When you criticize yourself constantly, your subconscious accepts that as instruction. When you praise yourself genuinely, your subconscious accepts that as well. It doesn't judge, it simply executes. The mirror technique works because it creates a sacred moment of connection between your conscious intention and your subconscious receptivity. You're not just thinking positive thoughts into the void. You're declaring truth directly to the one who must accept it yourself. Now, let me address a common mistake people make with mirror work. They stand there and recite affirmations they don't believe. They say, "I am confident," while their eyes betray doubt. They declare, "I am prosperous," while their body language radiates lack. This creates internal conflict, not harmony. The key is to start where you are. If you can't say, "I am completely confident" with conviction, begin with, "I am becoming more confident each day." If "I am wealthy" feels like a lie, try, "I am open to receiving abundance." Your subconscious responds to authenticity, not wishful thinking. It needs to feel the truth in your words, even if that truth is simply your genuine intention to change. I once worked with a woman who couldn't look at herself in the mirror without crying. Years of abuse had convinced her she was unworthy of love. The thought of speaking kindly to her reflection seemed impossible. So we started with something simpler. Each morning, she would look in the mirror for just 10 seconds and say one word: "Worthy." That's all, just one word. The first week, she cried every time. The second week, she managed to say it without tears. By the third week, something shifted. The word began to feel true. And that's when the real transformation began, not with fireworks, not with some mystical thunderbolt, but with a quiet knowing that settled into her bones. She realized she didn't need him to validate her worth. She had given away her power, handed it to someone else and said, "Here, you decide if I'm enough." And she took that power back, not through anger, not through revenge, but through a simple, radical act. She chose to see herself differently. This is the part that most people miss. They think healing means going back to who you were before. But you can't unbreak a bone and pretend the fracture never happened. The bone heals, yes, but it often heals stronger than before. The same is true for your psyche. When you do the inner work, when you genuinely reprogram your subconscious, you don't return to your former self. You become something more resilient, more conscious, more whole. Let me give you another example. I once knew a man who lost everything in a business collapse. I mean everything: his company, his savings, his reputation. He told me he'd wake up at 3 in the morning with his heart pounding, replaying every decision, every mistake. His subconscious mind was on a loop, reinforcing failure, embedding the identity of someone who couldn't be trusted with success. He came to me broken, and I told him the same thing I'm telling you. Your subconscious doesn't care about your history. It only cares about what you're feeding it right now, in this moment. So we started simple. Every night before sleep, he would say, "I am resourceful. Opportunities flow to me. I rebuild with wisdom." Every morning, the same. No exceptions. At first, nothing changed externally. But internally, something profound was happening. His nervous system began to calm. The 3 a.m. panic attacks became less frequent. He started noticing small opportunities: a conversation at a coffee shop, a chance email, a random idea that popped into his head during a walk. Within a year, he had built a new business, different from the first, but aligned with who he had become through the process. And here's what he told me that I'll never forget. "I'm grateful for the collapse. Not because it was easy, but because it forced me to discover that my value wasn't tied to my bank account. I had to learn that I could create from nothing, that the real resource was never money, it was me." That conversation changed something fundamental in how I understood wealth, because we've been conditioned to believe that money is the scarce resource. That's the lie that keeps most people trapped. They're waiting for capital, waiting for investors, waiting for the perfect conditions. But the real limitation was never capital, it was consciousness. Your mind is the only true capital you'll ever need. Let me show you what I mean. There's a woman I know who started a consulting business with nothing but a borrowed laptop and a library card for internet access. She had expertise, she had experience, but she had no money. Everyone told her she needed funding, she needed office space, she needed a professional website. She needed all these external things before she could begin. But she understood something most people miss entirely. She understood that the value was already within her. The knowledge in her mind, the ability to solve problems, the capacity to serve, that was the capital. So she started with a single client she found through a conversation at a coffee shop. She delivered such extraordinary value that person referred her to 3 others. Those 3 became 9. Within 18 months, she had built a multiple 6-figure business without a single dollar of outside investment. The capital was always there. It was just invisible until she decided to use it. This is what most people never grasp. They're looking outside themselves for resources that only exist within. They want the money first, then they'll take action. But the universe doesn't work that way. Consciousness precedes manifestation. The inner resource must be activated before the outer resource appears. Think about the greatest creations in human history. They didn't start with money. They started with an idea, a vision, a burning conviction in someone's mind. The money came later, attracted to the clarity and certainty of that vision. Money follows consciousness. It never leads it. So when you say you don't have enough money to start, what you're really saying is you haven't yet claimed the wealth that already exists within your own awareness. You're waiting for permission from your bank account to become who you already are. The world will never hand you what you refuse to hand yourself. It will never validate what you haven't first validated within your own consciousness. This is why poverty persists, not because resources are scarce, but because acceptance is abundant. We've become too comfortable accepting lack as our reality, too willing to surrender to circumstances, too quick to believe that the outer world dictates our inner state. But here's what changes everything. The moment you stop seeking and start claiming, the entire universe reorganizes itself around your assumption, not your wish, not your hope, your assumption. The thing you take for granted as already done. When you assume wealth, you don't look for signs of it, you expect it the way you expect the sun to rise. You don't question it, you don't doubt it. You simply move through your day as the person who already has it. And this is where most people stumble. They try to assume wealth while simultaneously preparing for poverty. They affirm abundance while checking their bank account with anxiety. They visualize success while mentally rehearsing failure. You cannot serve two masters. Your consciousness cannot hold two opposing states as true. It will always default to the one you feed with your attention, your emotion, your silent inner speech. What are you saying to yourself when no one is listening? What story are you telling in the privacy of your own mind? Because that story, that inner conversation, is the blueprint of your future. Not the vision board on your wall, not the affirmations you speak once a day. The constant, habitual, repetitive inner dialogue that runs like background music through your consciousness, that is what builds your world. If your inner speech is filled with complaint, with justification for why things can't work, with explanations for your limitations, then that is the world you are constructing. You are the architect of your experience, and your inner conversations are the building materials. Every thought is a brick, every assumption is a foundation, and you've been building this structure your entire life, mostly unconsciously, mostly by default. But now you know, now you can choose. You can start rebuilding today by changing what you say to yourself about yourself. You might be thinking, but Joseph, I've tried affirmations. I've tried positive thinking. It didn't work. And I understand that frustration. But here's what most people miss. They treat affirmations like magic spells. They repeat words without feeling, without belief, without the emotional conviction that makes them real. Your subconscious doesn't respond to empty words. It responds to feeling. It responds to belief. It responds to the emotional tone behind what you're saying. When you say, I am confident, but you feel anxious, your subconscious registers the anxiety, not the words. When you say, I am wealthy, but you feel lack, your subconscious accepts the lack, not the affirmation. This is why so many people give up. They're speaking one language with their words and another with their emotions, and the subconscious always listens to the emotions. So how do you bridge that gap? How do you make your affirmations real? You start where you are. You don't leap from I'm a failure to I'm wildly successful and expect your subconscious to accept it. That's too big a jump. Your inner critic will reject it immediately. Instead, you build a bridge. You start with statements that feel believable, that feel true enough that your subconscious can accept them. If I am successful feels like a lie, try I am learning to succeed. If I am confident feels impossible, try I am growing more confident each day. If I am loved feels untrue, start with I am worthy of love. These bridge statements don't trigger resistance. They feel possible. And when something feels possible, your subconscious begins to accept it. And when your subconscious accepts it, it begins to manifest it. From there, you gradually strengthen your declarations. As I am learning to succeed becomes believable, you move to success comes naturally to me. As I am growing more confident settles in, you shift to I am confident in who I am. This is how you reprogram yourself without triggering the protective mechanisms that reject change. You see, the subconscious mind doesn't care about your logic. It doesn't respond to force. It responds to impression, to repetition, to feeling. That's why affirmations work, not because of the words themselves, but because of the emotional conviction behind them. You can say, I am wealthy 1,000 times, but if beneath those words there's doubt, fear, or disbelief, your subconscious registers the doubt, not the declaration. This is where so many people fail. They treat affirmations like magic spells, repeating them mechanically while their inner world remains unchanged. They say the words, but they don't feel them. They declare abundance while imagining scarcity. They affirm health while picturing illness, and then they wonder why nothing changes. The truth is this: your subconscious accepts what you feel to be true, not what you wish were true. So when you're building a new belief, you must cultivate the feeling that accompanies that belief. If you want to believe you're confident, you must conjure the feeling of confidence as you make your declaration. If you want to believe you're capable, you must sit with the sensation of capability. This is not pretending, this is rehearsal. Just as an actor rehearses a role until it becomes second nature, you rehearse the emotions and thoughts of the person you're becoming until they become natural to you. You practice feeling successful before success arrives. You practice feeling loved before love shows up. You practice feeling secure before security manifests. And here's what happens when you do this consistently. Your external reality begins to shift, not because you forced it, but because you changed the frequency you're broadcasting. Your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs, these are all vibrations, and the universe responds to vibration. When you shift your internal state, you shift what you attract, what you notice, what you pursue, and what pursues you. The people who transformed their lives didn't wait for circumstances to change before they changed their thinking. They changed their thinking first, and the circumstances followed. They understood that external change is always preceded by internal change. Always. Now I want to address something that trips up many people on this journey. They start to see results, small improvements, things beginning to shift. And then fear creeps in. The fear of success. The fear of actually having what they want. You might think this sounds absurd. Who would fear success? But let me tell you, it's more common than you realize. Success means change. It means responsibility. It means stepping into a new version of yourself, and that can be terrifying to the part of you that's comfortable with struggle, that's identified with limitation for so long. I've seen people sabotage themselves right at the threshold of their breakthrough. Just when everything was aligning, just when their affirmations were about to manifest in physical form, they'd unconsciously create a crisis, pick a fight, make a reckless decision, anything to return to the familiar discomfort they'd known for years. This is why you must be vigilant with your thinking, not just when things are difficult, but especially when things start improving. Your subconscious mind may resist the unfamiliar territory of abundance, health, or love if it's been accustomed to lack, illness, or loneliness. Here's how you handle this. You acknowledge the fear without giving it power. You say to yourself, I recognize this fear of change, but I am not governed by fear. I am governed by faith in the infinite intelligence within me. I welcome the new. I welcome abundance. I welcome health. I welcome love. I am ready to receive all the good that is mine by divine right. You see, spiritual growth isn't always comfortable. Transformation requires the death of the old self, the old patterns, the old identity. And death, even the death of what no longer serves you, can feel frightening. But on the other side of that fear is freedom. On the other side of that resistance is the life you've been dreaming of. The universe is ready to give you everything you desire. The only question is, are you ready to receive it? Are you willing to release your grip on the familiar, on the identity you've built around your struggles, and step into your power? Because here's what I've learned through decades of studying the mind and working with thousands of people. The universe doesn't reward doubt. It doesn't respond to hesitation. It mirrors your dominant mental conviction. When you stand before the mirror of consciousness with absolute faith, with unwavering certainty, the reflection you receive is equally absolute. Think about water for a moment. Water doesn't argue with the shape of its container. It doesn't resist. It simply conforms, completely and effortlessly. Your subconscious mind operates with this same fluid intelligence. It takes the shape of whatever thoughts you consistently pour into it. If you pour limitation, it becomes limitation. If you pour abundance, it becomes abundance. The choice of what you pour has always been yours. I want to share something that might challenge you. There's a woman I knew who spent 30 years believing she was unlucky in love. 30 years. She had evidence to support this belief: failed relationships, betrayals, heartbreak after heartbreak. Her story was airtight. Everyone who knew her agreed. She just had bad luck with men. But here's what was really happening. She was walking around with a subconscious program that said, I am not worthy of lasting love. And the universe, being the perfect mirror it is, kept reflecting that program back to her. Then one day, something shifted. She stopped telling the story of her past. She stopped identifying as the woman who couldn't find love. Instead, she began to live from a new assumption. I am deeply loved and cherished. She didn't wait for evidence. She didn't need proof. She simply assumed it was true and lived from that place. Within months, everything changed. Not because the universe suddenly decided to be kind to her, but because she changed the signal she was broadcasting. Now, some of you might be thinking, but what if I assume something and it doesn't happen? Doesn't that prove this is all nonsense? Here's what you're missing. When you truly assume something, there's no room for doubt. The moment you're waiting to see if it works, you're not assuming, you're hoping. You're testing. And hope is just fear dressed up in optimistic clothing. Real assumption is final. It doesn't need evidence, because at times is times the evidence. It doesn't wait for proof, because it operates from the conviction that it's already done. Let me share something with you that changed everything for me. Years ago, I was working with a man who had been struggling financially for decades. He had tried everything: affirmations, vision boards, you name it, nothing worked. When he came to me, he was desperate. He said, I've done everything, I've said the words, I've visualized. Why isn't this working? I asked him one question: when you visualize having money, where are you standing? He looked confused. I said, are you standing in your current reality, looking at wealth as something out there, something you're trying to pull toward you? Or are you standing in the reality where you already have it, looking back at your old fears as something that used to be true? He was silent. Then he said, I've been standing in the wrong place. That's the secret right there. Most people are standing in lack, reaching for abundance. You have to stand times and times abundance, and let lack dissolve in your rearview mirror. Standing in the right place, that's what changes everything. Not hoping to get there someday, not wishing you were there, but closing your eyes and times being times there right now, in consciousness. I knew a teacher who was struggling with her health. She'd been fighting illness for years, always thinking, when will I be healed? When will this go away? One day she stopped fighting. She stopped reaching. She simply closed her eyes and felt herself whole, not as a future possibility, as a present fact. She imagined getting dressed in the morning with ease, walking without pain, laughing without exhaustion. She did this every night before sleep. Within 3 months, her doctors were baffled. The symptoms that had plagued her for years simply began to dissolve. They had no medical explanation. But she knew. She'd stopped standing in sickness and started standing in health. Your subconscious doesn't argue with you. It doesn't debate whether you're worthy or whether it's possible. It simply accepts the state you occupy with conviction and feeling. When you truly inhabit your desire and consciousness, when you feel it as naturally as you feel the chair beneath you, your subconscious goes to work making it real in your outer world. This is why I keep emphasizing feeling. Not because feeling is magic, but because feeling is the language of belief. When you feel wealthy, you believe you're wealthy. When you feel loved, you believe you're loved. And what you believe with feeling, your subconscious must express. Think of it like this: your subconscious is a garden. Every thought with feeling is a seed. Most people plant weeds all day, worry, doubt, fear, and then wonder why their garden is overrun. They throw in a few flower seeds and say, see, this doesn't work. I planted good thoughts and nothing happened. But the weeds are still dominant. The weeds are what they felt all day long. You have to tend the garden. You have to pull the weeds the moment they sprout. When worry comes, don't entertain it. Replace it immediately with its opposite. When doubt whispers, this isn't working, you whisper back, it's already done. You guard your inner garden like your life depends on it, because it does. This is the difference between those who manifest their desires and those who endlessly talk about manifesting. The successful ones have become disciplined guardians of their inner world. They've trained themselves to respond instantly to negative thoughts, not with struggle, not with resistance, but with calm replacement. Think of it like this. You wouldn't let a stranger walk into your home and rearrange your furniture, would you? You wouldn't allow someone to come into your kitchen and poison your food. Yet every day, people allow random thoughts they didn't choose, thoughts that harm them, to enter their minds and redecorate their entire internal landscape. They let fear move in and take up residence. They give doubt the master bedroom. This is insanity when you understand what's really happening. Your subconscious mind is your home. It's the only home that truly matters. Everything you experience externally is just a reflection of the interior design of this home. When you protect it, when you carefully choose what you allow inside, your external world transforms to match that interior beauty. I've watched people completely reverse their circumstances, health, wealth, relationships, simply by becoming ruthless about what they allow into their mental space. Not harsh with themselves, but firm. Loving but decisive. They catch the negative thought before it takes root. They redirect immediately. You can do this too. In fact, you must do this if you want your manifestation to come to pass. When a fearful thought arises about your desire, you don't fight it. You don't say, "I shouldn't be thinking this." That only gives it more power. Instead, you simply turn your attention to the opposite. Fear says, "You'll fail." You calmly affirm, "I succeed in all my undertakings." Doubt says, "Nothing ever works out for you." You respond, "Everything is always working out for my highest good." This isn't denial. This is direction. You're directing the incredible creative power of your mind toward what you want, not what you fear. The subconscious doesn't judge your thoughts. It doesn't say, "That's a silly fear" or "That's an unrealistic dream." It simply accepts what you consistently impress upon it and makes it real in your experience. This is why your job is so clear. Impress it only with what you desire. Feed it only the thoughts, feelings, and images that match your wish fulfilled. And here's something I want you to really grasp. The subconscious doesn't just respond to your words, it responds to the emotion behind them. It responds to the feeling tone you attach to your mental images. You can say all the affirmations you want, but if there's no feeling behind them, you're just reciting empty words into the void. Feeling is the secret. I've said this before, and I'll say it again until it becomes part of your very being. When you imagine your wish fulfilled, you must feel the reality of it. You must generate within yourself the emotional state that would be natural if your desire were already a fact. This feeling is what impresses the subconscious mind. This feeling is what sets the creative forces in motion. Think of it this way. Your subconscious speaks the language of emotion, not logic. It doesn't understand debate or reasoning. It understands feeling. When you feel wealthy, it creates wealth. When you feel loved, it attracts love. When you feel healthy, it manifests health. The feeling is the communication. The feeling is the command. So many people wonder why their affirmations don't work. They stand in front of the mirror and say, "I am prosperous," while feeling completely broke. They say, "I am confident," while trembling with insecurity, and then they're surprised when nothing changes. But you cannot fool your subconscious mind. It doesn't hear your words. It feels your conviction or your doubt. This is why I constantly return to the practice of living in the end. When you live in the end, you naturally feel the emotions that correspond to your fulfilled desire. You're not pretending. You're not faking it. You're actually experiencing, in imagination, what you would experience in reality. And because your subconscious cannot tell the difference between a vividly imagined experience and a real one, it accepts this imagined state as true and begins to externalize it. This is why assumption, when maintained with feeling, always hardens into fact. It's not magic, it's law. The law of mind, the law of consciousness. And it operates with the same precision and consistency as the law of gravity. Let me give you a practical example. Suppose you desire a new home. A specific home. One that feels perfect for you and your family. Don't just think about it vaguely. Don't just wish for it. Instead, go there in imagination. See yourself walking through the front door. Feel the texture of the doorknob in your hand. Hear the sound of your footsteps on the floor. Smell the air inside. Look around at the rooms. Notice the light coming through the windows. Sit in your favorite chair. Feel the comfort. Experience the satisfaction of knowing this is yours. Do this repeatedly. Not once, not twice, but again and again until it becomes natural, until it feels real, until you can enter this scene at will and live in it with all the sensory vividness you can muster. And as you do this, something remarkable happens within you. A shift occurs. a subtle but profound change in your consciousness. You begin to feel as though it's already true. Not that it will be true someday, but that it is true now. This feeling, this conviction, this inner knowing is the secret. Because when you truly feel it real, when you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled with such intensity that it becomes natural to you, your subconscious mind accepts it, and once accepted, it must express it. It has no choice. It is compelled by its nature to outpicture in your world what you have impressed upon it in consciousness. This is why I say to you, the subconscious mind is the faithful servant. It never argues, it never questions, it never says, "Are you sure about this?" It simply obeys the dominant impression, and this is both the greatest gift and the greatest responsibility you have been given. Think of it this way. Your subconscious is like a garden. A magnificent, fertile garden that will grow absolutely anything you plant in it. It doesn't judge the seeds. It doesn't refuse to grow weeds while accepting flowers. No, it grows whatever you plant with equal enthusiasm, equal power, equal certainty. Plant thoughts of lack, and it grows circumstances of poverty. Plant thoughts of sickness, and it grows conditions of disease. Plant thoughts of limitation, and it grows walls around your life. But plant thoughts of abundance, and it grows riches beyond measure. Plant thoughts of health, and it grows vitality and strength. Plant thoughts of possibility, and it grows opportunities you never imagined existed. The garden doesn't care. It simply grows what you plant. And here's what most people never realize. You are planting seeds every single moment of every single day. With every thought you think, with every word you speak, with every image you hold in your mind, you are constantly gardening your subconscious, whether you realize it or not. The question is not whether you are impressing your subconscious mind, you always are. The question is, what are you impressing upon it? What seeds are you planting in this moment? What harvest are you preparing for tomorrow? Most people walk through life as unconscious gardeners. They plant worry, fear, doubt, resentment without even knowing they're doing it. Then they stand back and wonder why their garden is full of thorns and thistles instead of roses and fruit trees. And here's the remarkable thing, your subconscious doesn't distinguish between what you deliberately plant and what accidentally falls into the soil. It accepts everything. Every thought, every image, every emotional state you entertain, it receives without judgment and begins to make real. This is why the casual thoughts you think are so important, the little things you say to yourself when nobody's listening. I'm so stupid. I never get it right. Nothing ever works out for me. These aren't just throwaway comments. They're seeds, potent seeds. And your subconscious mind is faithfully cultivating them into your lived experience. I've watched people sabotage their entire lives with casual negative self-talk they didn't even realize they were engaging in. A woman once told me she could never understand why she kept attracting dishonest business partners. When we explored her thinking patterns, we discovered she constantly told herself, "People always take advantage of me." She thought she was just observing reality. She didn't realize she was creating it. Your subconscious takes your habitual thinking as instruction. If you repeatedly think, "I can't afford that," your subconscious works to make sure you can't. If you constantly think, "I'm not good with people," your subconscious ensures your social interactions confirm that belief. It's not punishing you, it's serving you. It's doing exactly what you've programmed it to do. This is why conscious gardening is so essential. You must become aware of what you're planting. You must monitor the quality of your mental seeds. You must refuse entry to thoughts that don't serve your highest good. When a negative thought appears, and they will appear, that's part of being human. You don't have to plant it. You can observe it, acknowledge it, and let it pass through without taking root. You can say, "That's not the seed I choose to plant. That's not the garden I choose to grow." Then deliberately plant something better. And this isn't about pretending negativity doesn't exist. It's not about spiritual bypassing or toxic positivity. It's about understanding the mechanics of how your mind actually works. Every thought you dwell on is being written into your subconscious. Every belief you rehearse is being carved deeper into the operating system that runs your life. So when negative thoughts arise, you don't fight them, you don't suppress them, you simply refuse to give them your creative attention. You become selective about where you invest your mental energy. You become intentional about which internal conversations you're willing to have. Because your subconscious doesn't care if something is good for you or bad for you, it only responds to what you habitually accept as true. This is why worry is so destructive. Worry is negative goal setting. It's using your imagination to create outcomes you don't want. It's planting weeds with the same care most people should be planting flowers. And your subconscious treats worry exactly the same way it treats desire. It says, oh, you're thinking about this constantly? You're visualizing it? You're feeling the emotions associated with it? Okay, I'll make it happen. So if you're going to use your imagination, use it deliberately. Use it intentionally. Use it for what you actually want, not for what you fear. Because the creative mechanism in your subconscious doesn't distinguish between the two. It simply brings into form whatever you persistently hold in your conscious mind. And here's something most people never realize. You're already doing this. You're already impressing your subconscious every single day. The only question is whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously. Whether you're planting seeds deliberately or letting the wind scatter whatever happens to blow through your mind. Most people are unconscious gardeners. They let any seed take root. They water weeds as enthusiastically as they water flowers. Then they wonder why their garden looks the way it does. But you don't have to be most people. You can become conscious. You can become deliberate. You can take full responsibility for what you allow to grow in the fertile soil of your subconscious mind. And when you take that responsibility, you stop blaming your past, your parents, your circumstances, or your genetics. You stop looking outside yourself for the source of your limitations. You turn inward. You recognize that the power that created your present reality is the same power that can transform it completely. This is not arrogance. This is spiritual maturity. This is understanding the law. The same subconscious that accepted the belief that you are not good enough can accept the new belief that you are divinely equipped for every good thing. The same mind that learned fear can learn faith. The same consciousness that absorbed lack can absorb abundance. But here is what most people miss in this process. They want to change their subconscious mind while still feeding it the same old poison. They want to plant new seeds while leaving all the weeds in place. They affirm abundance in the morning and then spend the entire day complaining about their bills. They visualize health and then obsess over every symptom. They declare confidence and then replay every past failure in vivid detail. You cannot do this. You cannot serve two masters. Your subconscious does not debate or analyze. It simply accepts what you repeatedly impress upon it. If you spend 5 minutes affirming wealth and 8 hours thinking about debt, what do you think your subconscious accepts as your dominant belief? This is why consistency matters more than intensity. It is not the occasional powerful visualization that transforms your life. It is the steady, persistent, daily repetition of your chosen belief. It is the gradual replacement of old patterns with new patterns. It is the patient work of a gardener who waters the good seeds every single day and removes the weeds as soon as they appear. And yes, the weeds will appear, old thoughts will return, doubt will knock on your door, fear will whisper in your ear. This is normal. This is part of the process. You have spent years, perhaps decades, cultivating certain beliefs. They will not disappear overnight simply because you decided to think differently. But here's the truth that will set you free. Every time you refuse the old thought and choose the new one, you weaken the old pattern and strengthen the new one. Every time you catch yourself in a negative spiral and deliberately redirect your mind, you are retraining your subconscious. Every time you replace a fearful image with a faithful one, you are literally rewiring your consciousness. This is not passive work. This is not wishful thinking. This is the most active, engaged, creative work you will ever do. You are not waiting for your mind to change. You are changing it. Deliberately, consistently, with faith as your fuel and persistence as your vehicle. And here's what most people don't realize. The subconscious mind doesn't argue with you. It doesn't debate. It doesn't question your authority. It simply accepts what you repeatedly impress upon it. It's like a faithful servant that says, "Yes, Master. Whatever you command, I will bring into manifestation." When you were a child, your subconscious accepted without question that you couldn't do certain things. It accepted the limitations others placed on you. It accepted the fears that were modeled for you. It didn't judge those impressions as true or false, it simply recorded them and began working to make them your reality. Now, as a conscious adult, you have the power to give new commands. You have the authority to impress new beliefs. And your subconscious will accept these new instructions with the same faithful obedience it gave to the old ones, but you must be consistent, you must be persistent, you must refuse to give contradictory orders. This is why half-hearted affirmations fail. This is why occasional positive thinking produces occasional results. Your subconscious responds to habit, to repetition, to emotional conviction. It responds to what you consistently feel and think, not to what you occasionally hope for. Think of it this way. If you told your subconscious mind every morning, "I am confident and successful," but then spent the rest of the day thinking, "Who am I kidding? I'm not good enough. I'll probably fail. Everyone else is better than me," which message do you think your subconscious will accept as your true instruction? The answer is obvious. Your subconscious accepts the dominant, habitual thought pattern. It responds to the emotional frequency you live in most of the time, not the one you visit occasionally. This is why transformation requires not just new thoughts, but new mental habits, not just occasional affirmations, but consistent mental discipline. Your subconscious mind doesn't judge, it doesn't evaluate whether your beliefs are beneficial or harmful, true or false, empowering or limiting. It simply accepts what you impress upon it and brings it into manifestation. This is both the great danger and the great opportunity of your mental life. If you consistently think thoughts of lack, your subconscious will manifest conditions of poverty. If you habitually dwell on fear, it will create circumstances that validate that fear. If you regularly imagine failure, it will guide you toward experiences of defeat, not because it wants to harm you, but because it's faithfully responding to the patterns you've established. This is why you must become the guardian of your own mind. You cannot afford the luxury of negative thinking. You cannot indulge in mental habits that contradict what you wish to experience. Every thought is a seed you're planting in the garden of your subconscious mind, and you will harvest exactly what you sow. The person who complains constantly about their circumstances is actually reinforcing those very circumstances. The individual who repeatedly says, "I can't afford this," or "I'm always broke," is giving their subconscious mind clear instructions to maintain poverty. The one who says, "Nothing ever works out for me," is programming failure into their experience. But here's what changes everything. You can begin right now to think differently. You can start today to impress new patterns on your subconscious mind. The past does not determine your future unless you continue to think the thoughts of the past. Your subconscious mind is always ready to accept new impressions. It doesn't care that you've been thinking negatively for 20 years or 40 years. The moment you begin to think constructively, it begins to work constructively. The moment you shift your mental frequency, it begins to manifest different results. This is the principle of mental renewal. You don't need to undo the past or fix previous mistakes. You simply need to start now with right thinking. Plant new seeds. Impress new patterns. Establish new habits of thought. Your mind doesn't know the difference between a real experience and one vividly imagined. This is not metaphor, this is neuroscience confirmed by modern research, validated by countless experiments. When you imagine yourself successful, your brain fires the same neural pathways as when you actually succeed. When you visualize yourself confident, your nervous system responds as though you already possess that confidence. This is why athletes mentally rehearse their performances. This is why surgeons visualize procedures before entering the operating room. They're not engaging in wishful thinking, they're programming their subconscious mind for excellence. You have this same power. You can rehearse your future. You can practice success in the theater of your mind before you ever step onto the stage of reality. Every night before sleep, spend 10 minutes in mental rehearsal. See yourself moving through your day with confidence. Watch yourself handling challenges with grace. Experience yourself achieving your goals. Feel the emotions of your success as though they're happening right now. Your subconscious accepts these mental images as instructions. It begins rearranging your reality to match the patterns you've impressed upon it. Opportunities you would have missed suddenly become visible. Solutions you couldn't see before become obvious. People and circumstances align in ways that seem miraculous but are actually the natural outworking of the law you've set in motion. This isn't magic. This is mechanics. This is how your mind was designed to function. But here's what most people miss. You must feel it, not just think it. Thought combined with feeling creates belief. Belief impresses the subconscious. And the subconscious externalizes what has been impressed upon it. Don't just visualize success, feel successful. Don't just imagine confidence, embody the feeling of confidence. Don't just picture abundance, generate the emotion of abundance within you right now. Your feelings are the language your subconscious understands best. When you combine a clear mental image with the corresponding emotion, you create an irresistible command that your subconscious must obey. Think of a lemon right now. Imagine slicing it open, see the juice dripping. Now imagine biting into that lemon, tasting the sour juice flooding your mouth. Did you salivate? Did your mouth pucker slightly? That's your subconscious responding to imagination as though it were real. Your subconscious mind doesn't argue with you. It doesn't question whether the lemon is real or imaginary. It simply accepts the image you present and sets the body's chemistry in motion accordingly. This is the mechanics of belief made visible in your own physiology. Now apply this same principle to your desires. When you imagine yourself prosperous, your subconscious begins to create the conditions for prosperity. When you imagine yourself healthy, healing forces are activated. When you imagine yourself confident, your nervous system aligns with that state. The subconscious is utterly impartial. It will manifest whatever you consistently impress upon it, whether constructive or destructive. This is why your habitual thinking is so crucial. Every thought repeated becomes a belief. Every belief becomes a conviction, and every conviction manifests in your experience. If you habitually think thoughts of lack, limitation, and failure, your subconscious faithfully reproduces those conditions in your world. If you habitually think thoughts of abundance, possibility, and success, those become your reality instead. The question is not whether this law works. It's working all the time, whether you're aware of it or not. The only question is whether you're using it consciously and constructively, or unconsciously and destructively. Most people use this creative power against themselves. They imagine the worst outcome and then wonder why it materializes. They rehearse failure and then feel victimized by their circumstances. They focus on illness and then can't understand why healing eludes them. This is not punishment. This is simply law. The creative mechanism responds to mental images regardless of their content. But you don't have to be among the unconscious majority. You can become a deliberate creator. You can learn to guard your mental imagery with the vigilance it deserves. You can cultivate the habit of dwelling only on thoughts and images aligned with your true desires. This requires discipline, yes, it requires persistence, but the rewards are limitless. When you gain mastery over your imagination, you gain mastery over your life. When you control the images you habitually entertain, you control the conditions you experience. So tonight, before you sleep, I want you to perform a simple experiment. An experiment that will prove to you, beyond all doubt, that your imagination is the true architect of your experience. Close your eyes and imagine a scene that implies the fulfillment of your deepest desire. Don't just see it vaguely, make it vivid, make it real, feel the texture of the moment. Hear the sounds around you, smell the air, touch the objects in your scene, and most importantly, feel the emotion of already having what you desire. If you want financial abundance, don't imagine counting money. That implies you're still counting, still accumulating. Instead, imagine a scene that implies abundance is already yours. Perhaps you're signing papers on your dream home, feeling the smooth pen in your hand, hearing the congratulations of those around you. Perhaps you're writing a generous check to a cause you care about, feeling the deep satisfaction of being able to give freely. If you want a loving relationship, don't imagine meeting someone. Imagine being with them. Feel the warmth of their presence beside you. Hear their laughter. Feel their hand in yours. Experience the naturalness of their companionship as though you've been together for years. If you want vibrant health, don't imagine going to doctors or reading clean test results. Imagine yourself doing what perfect health would allow you to do. Feel yourself running effortlessly, breathing deeply, moving with energy and grace. Feel the vitality coursing through your body. Do you see the difference? The imagination must always imply fulfillment, never the seeking of fulfillment. You must imagine from the end, not toward the end. And here's what will happen. At first, your rational mind will protest. It will say, "This is foolish, this is wishful thinking, this changes nothing." But persist anyway. Repeat this imaginal scene night after night, fall asleep within it, let it become more real to you than the facts of your current circumstance. Within a week, within days sometimes, reality begins to shift. The phone rings, the email arrives, the opportunity appears, seemingly out of nowhere. But you know better. You know it came from within. You called it forth from the invisible into the visible through the act of assumption. And here's what most people never understand. The bridge of incidents that brings your desire to you will often appear so natural, so logical in retrospect, that others will never suspect the metaphysical power you employed. They'll say you were lucky. They'll say you had good timing. They'll say it was a coincidence. Let them think what they wish. You know the truth. You know that you set forces in motion through your controlled imagination, through your deliberate assumption of the wish fulfilled. Now, some of you right now are thinking, "But Joseph, I've tried visualization before, and it didn't work, and I want to address this directly because it's a crucial point." When most people say visualization didn't work for them, what they actually mean is that they tried it once or twice, felt foolish, doubted every moment of it, and then gave up when results didn't appear within 48 hours. That's not application of the law. That's dabbling. That's testing. And consciousness responds to assumption, not to tests. You must approach this with the understanding that you are dealing with a law as reliable as the law of gravity. When you plant a seed in the ground, you don't dig it up every day to see if it's growing. You trust the process. You water it, give it sunlight, and allow nature to do its work. The same principle applies here. You plant the seed in consciousness through your imaginal act, you nourish it through repetition and feeling, and you trust that the invisible laws of mind are bringing it to pass in ways you cannot yet perceive. Doubt is the only thing that can interfere with this process. Doubt is the weed that, if allowed to grow, will choke out your desired harvest. This is why persistence in assumption is so critical. You must persist until the assumption hardens into fact. And let me be very clear about something. Persistence doesn't mean strain. It doesn't mean effort in the physical sense. It means gently, lovingly, returning to your imaginal act night after night until it feels completely natural to you. You see, most people start with tremendous enthusiasm. They visualize for one night, maybe two, and they expect the heavens to open. And when nothing changes immediately, they abandon the practice. They say, "This doesn't work for me." But let me tell you what's really happening. You're planting seeds in the deepest soil of your subconscious mind. You don't plant a seed today and expect fruit tomorrow. You plant it, you water it consistently, and you trust the process. The seed doesn't struggle to become a tree, it simply follows its nature. And your imaginal act, when persisted in, follows its nature too. It must manifest. I've seen this pattern countless times. Someone comes to me and says, "Dr. Murphy, I visualized my goal for 3 nights, and nothing happened." 3 nights. Can you imagine? They want to overturn years, sometimes decades, of contrary thinking with 3 nights of practice. That's not how the law works. Think about learning to walk as a child. You didn't succeed on the first attempt. You fell, got up, fell again. But you persisted, not through gritted teeth or willpower, but through natural desire. You wanted to walk, so you kept trying until walking became automatic. Your imaginal act must become just as automatic, just as natural. I want you to understand something profound. Every time you return to your imaginal scene, you're not starting over. You're deepening the impression. You're carving the channel in your subconscious more clearly. The first night, you're making a scratch on the surface. The second night, that scratch becomes a line. The 10th night, it's becoming a groove. And after enough repetition, it becomes a channel through which the creative forces of your subconscious must flow. There's a beautiful rhythm to this work. You don't have to force it. You don't have to make it happen. You simply remain faithful to your vision. You go to sleep in it night after night. And one morning, you wake up and realize the thing has come to pass. Not through your effort, but through the natural outpicturing of your sustained inner conviction. That's the power of the Sabbath, the power of resting in the wish fulfilled. Now, let me address something that often comes up. People ask me, "Joseph, what about action? Are you saying I should just sit around and do nothing? Shouldn't I be working toward my goals? And here's what I tell them. Of course you take action. Of course you move in the world. But the action you take must come from the consciousness of already being, not from the desperation of trying to become. When you rest in the Sabbath, when you live in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, the actions you take are inspired. They're natural. They flow effortlessly from your new state of consciousness. You're not forcing, you're not pushing, you're not striving from a place of lack. Instead, you're being moved, you're being guided. The right doors open at the right time, the right people appear, the right opportunities present themselves. And you accept them naturally because they're in harmony with what you already are in consciousness. That's the difference between working from the Sabbath and working from the 6 days. One is inspired, effortless, and effective. The other is forced, exhausting, and often futile. So rest in the Sabbath. Live in the feeling of your wish fulfilled. And then watch as the world around you rearranges itself to match the inner pattern you've accepted. Now, I want to share with you one final principle that ties everything together. It's the principle of assumption. Whatever you assume to be true becomes true in your experience. Not sometimes, not eventually, not if you're lucky, always. Your assumptions harden into facts, they crystallize into your lived reality. If you assume you're limited, you'll experience limitation. If you assume life is hard, it will be hard. If you assume people are against you, they will be. But if you assume you're prosperous, you'll experience prosperity. If you assume you're healthy, health will be yours. If you assume you're loved, love will surround you. Your assumptions are the bridge between the invisible and the visible, between thought and thing, between dream and reality. And here's what most people never grasp. Your assumption doesn't need permission from your current circumstances. It doesn't need validation from the outside world. It doesn't wait for conditions to improve before it can operate. Your assumption creates the conditions. Let me share something with you that might shake your understanding. There was a woman who came to me years ago, drowning in debt. She couldn't see a way out. Every bill was a reminder of her failure. Every knock on the door filled her with dread. I asked her one simple question: can you assume you're financially free? She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. But I'm not, she said. I owe thousands. How can I assume something that's so obviously not true? And I told her what I'm telling you now. Your assumption isn't about denying your current reality. It's about refusing to let that reality be your final word. She began assuming she was financially free, not hoping, not wishing, not pretending, assuming. She felt what it would feel like to open her mail without fear. She imagined the relief of having more than enough. She lived from that assumption, even when the bills kept coming. Within 6 months, everything shifted. An inheritance she didn't know existed, a job opportunity that tripled her income. Debts mysteriously resolved. She didn't make it happen through effort. She assumed it was already done, and reality rearranged itself to match her assumption. This is the law. This is how it works. Your assumption is your instruction to the universe. It's your command to the creative forces that shape your world. And the beautiful thing? You're already assuming something right now. You're already instructing. You're already commanding. The question is, what are you assuming? Are you assuming lack or abundance? Are you assuming failure or success? Are you assuming you're stuck or that you're free? Your life right now is the perfect mirror of your habitual assumptions. Nothing more, nothing less. So choose your assumptions wisely, select them deliberately, wear them consistently. Because assumption is not just a mental trick, it's the very mechanism through which consciousness becomes experience. Assume the wish fulfilled, and watch as your world transforms to reflect that assumption back to you. Now, let me address something that often confuses people: the relationship between assumption and faith. Many ask me, Dr. Murphy, is this just blind faith? Am I supposed to believe something ridiculous against all evidence? No, this is not blind faith. This is times intelligent times faith based on understanding how consciousness works. Faith, in the biblical sense, means psychological fidelity, mental loyalty to your assumption. It means you remain faithful to the idea you wish to embody, despite contradictory appearances in the outer world. This is not foolishness, it's wisdom. because you now understand that the outer world is a delayed reflection of previous inner states. Think of a farmer planting seeds. Does he dig them up every day to check if they're growing? Does he stand over the soil demanding immediate results? No. He plants the seed, covers it with earth where it cannot be seen, and goes about his business with quiet confidence that nature will do its work. His faith is not blind, it's based on understanding natural law. Your assumption works the same way. You plant the seed, your desired state in consciousness. You cover it by withdrawing your attention from the problem and placing it on the solution. Then you go about your life with the quiet inner knowing that consciousness is now working beneath the surface to bring your assumption to pass. The mistake most people make is that they plant the seed on Monday, then dig it up on Tuesday to see if it's working. They assume their wish fulfilled in the morning, then spend the afternoon checking their bank account, their phone, their circumstances looking for evidence. And when they don't see immediate results, they abandon their assumption and return to their old state. This is why patience is required, not the patience of passive waiting, but the patience of persistent assumption. You must be willing to sustain your new state long enough for it to harden into fact. How long is that? It varies. Sometimes the manifestation happens quickly, other times it takes weeks or months. The key is persistence. You don't give up after one prayer session, you don't abandon your mental work after a week of no visible results. Think of it like planting a garden. When you put a seed in the ground, you don't dig it up the next day to see if it's growing. You trust the process. You water it consistently. You give it sunlight. And in time, that seed breaks through the soil. Your subconscious mind works the same way. Once you've planted the seed of your desire through feeling and belief, you must water it daily with your attention and faith. I've seen people give up just days before their manifestation was about to appear. They were so close, but doubt crept in. They looked at their circumstances and said, "This isn't working," and in that moment they uprooted their own seed. Don't make that mistake. Here's what I recommend. Set aside time each day for your mental work. Morning and night are ideal, but find what works for you. During this time, enter your relaxed state. Visualize your desire fulfilled. Feel the emotions. Speak your affirmations with conviction, then release it completely. Throughout the rest of your day, whenever your desire comes to mind, hold the feeling of already having it. Don't long for it. Don't wish for it. Feel grateful for it, as if it's already yours. If doubt arises, and it will, don't fight it. Simply redirect your attention back to your desired state. Doubt only has power if you dwell on it. One woman I worked with wanted to heal her relationship with her estranged daughter. They hadn't spoken in 3 years due to a bitter argument. Every night, she would imagine her daughter calling her. She would feel the joy of hearing her voice. She would picture them laughing together, embracing, sharing meals. For 2 months, nothing changed externally. Her daughter didn't call. There was no letter, no message. But this woman didn't waver. She kept feeling the reality of their reconciliation in her mind. Then one afternoon, completely out of nowhere, her daughter showed up at her door. She said she'd been thinking about her mother constantly for weeks and felt a strong pull to reconnect. They embraced, they cried, and their relationship was restored. That woman's persistent mental work created the bridge. Her subconscious mind, impressed with the image and feeling of reconciliation, brought about the circumstances to make it real. This is the power you have, but you must use it consistently. And this is where most people falter, not in understanding the principle, but in applying it consistently. They affirm once, twice, maybe 3 times. Then they stop, they check the outside world for evidence. When they don't see immediate change, they doubt, they waver. They let the old patterns creep back in. But you must understand this. The subconscious mind does not work on your schedule. It works on its own divine timeline. Your job is not to dictate when or how your desire will manifest. Your job is to stay faithful to the feeling, the image, the conviction of its reality. I knew a man, a talented artist who spent years struggling to make a living from his work. He was bitter, resentful. He believed the world didn't appreciate real art. He believed the system was rigged against him. And so, his subconscious mind, ever faithful to his beliefs, kept him struggling. His resentment attracted more reasons to be resentful. One day, he came to me. I told him what I'm telling you now. I said, stop fighting the world. Stop complaining about what isn't working. Start assuming that your talent is valued, that buyers are seeking your work, that success is natural for you. He resisted at first. He said, but that's not true. I can't lie to myself. I said, you're already lying to yourself. You're telling yourself you're unappreciated, that you can't succeed. Why not tell yourself something better? He began to practice. Every night before sleep, he would imagine gallery owners praising his work. He would feel the satisfaction of selling a painting. He would hear the sound of his bank account growing. He didn't know how it would happen. He just stayed faithful to the feeling. Within 6 months, everything changed. A gallery owner discovered his work online. An art collector commissioned a series. Opportunities he never imagined began to flow toward him. Not because the world suddenly changed, but because he changed. His subconscious mind, impressed with a new belief, began to express it in his reality. This is not magic. This is law. The law of mind. The law of belief. The law that governs every aspect of your experience. And here's what you must grasp. Your subconscious mind is working right now, this very moment, to manifest whatever you have impressed upon it. Whether you are conscious of it or not, whether you believe in this principle or not, your subconscious is translating your dominant beliefs into physical reality. It cannot do otherwise. It is the law of its operation. Think of a person who constantly says, I never get the breaks. Good things don't happen to people like me. What are they doing? They are impressing a belief upon their subconscious mind. And their subconscious, being utterly faithful, proceeds to create circumstances that align perfectly with that belief. They don't get the breaks not because the universe is against them, but because they have commanded their subconscious to create that exact experience. Now consider someone who, despite temporary setbacks, maintains the belief, good things are always coming to me. I am guided to the right opportunities. This person is impressing an entirely different belief. And their subconscious mind, operating under the same law, begins to arrange circumstances, attract people, and present opportunities that validate this belief. Same law, same subconscious mechanism, completely different results. The difference lies entirely in what was believed and impressed upon the subconscious mind. I want you to conduct an experiment over the next 30 days. Select one area of your life where you desire a change. It might be your health, your finances, your relationships, or your career. Choose one specific thing. Now, identify the belief you currently hold about this area. Be ruthlessly honest. What do you really believe about it? Not what you wish you believed, but what you actually believe deep down. Then, formulate a new belief, the belief you would hold if you were already experiencing what you desire. Write it down as a clear, present tense statement. For instance, if your current belief is, I'm always struggling financially, your new belief might be money flows to me easily and naturally from expected and unexpected sources. If your current belief is, I'm not good enough for success, your new belief becomes I am worthy and deserving of all the success that comes to me. The second step is repetition with feeling. This new belief needs to be impressed upon your subconscious mind through consistent repetition, but not mechanical repetition. You must repeat it with feeling, with conviction, with the emotional tone of someone who already lives this truth. Say it to yourself multiple times a day upon waking, before sleep, and whenever the old belief tries to resurface. Feel the truth of it as you speak it. The third step is to act as if. This is where faith becomes practical. Begin to move through your day as someone who already holds this new belief. How would you speak? How would you carry yourself? What decisions would you make? What opportunities would you notice? Your actions send powerful signals to your subconscious mind, reinforcing the new belief pattern you're establishing. The fourth step is vigilance. Your old belief will not surrender easily. It has momentum, history, neural pathways built over years or decades. It will try to reassert itself, especially during moments of stress or doubt. When you catch yourself slipping back into the old pattern, don't judge yourself harshly. Simply acknowledge it, release it, and return to your new belief. This is not a battle to be won through force, but a reconditioning accomplished through patient persistence. I want you to understand something profound. Every belief you currently hold was once new. There was a time before you believed it. Somehow, through experience, repetition, or emotional impact, that belief became established in your subconscious mind. What was done can be undone. What was learned can be unlearned. What was programmed can be reprogrammed. You are not a victim of your beliefs. You are their creator, whether you realized it or not. And what you created unconsciously, you can now recreate consciously, with intention and purpose. This realization is both humbling and empowering. Humbling because it requires us to take responsibility for the mental patterns we've allowed to run our lives. Empowering because it means we're not at the mercy of forces beyond our control. The power that created the limitation is the same power that can dissolve it. I've watched people transform seemingly overnight once this truth penetrated their consciousness. Not because some external miracle occurred, but because they stopped fighting their own mind and started cooperating with it. They stopped trying to overcome their subconscious and started reprogramming it instead. There's a woman I knew who spent years battling anxiety. She tried every technique, every therapy, every remedy. Nothing worked because she was approaching it from the wrong angle. She was trying to defeat her anxiety, which only reinforced the belief that anxiety was a powerful enemy. The day she understood that her anxiety was simply her subconscious mind faithfully executing old programming, everything shifted. She stopped fighting and started reprogramming. Within weeks, the anxiety that had dominated her life for decades began to dissolve. This is the power of understanding the true nature of your mind. You stop being a helpless victim and become a conscious creator. You stop reacting to life and start directing it. But here's what most people miss in this equation. They think reprogramming the subconscious is some complex, mystical process requiring years of study or special techniques. It's not. The subconscious mind accepts whatever you impress upon it with feeling and repetition. That's it. That's the whole mechanism. Every night before sleep, you have a golden opportunity. Your conscious mind becomes quieter, the gateway to your subconscious opens wider. This is when you can plant new seeds. Not through force, not through struggle, but through gentle, persistent suggestion accompanied by the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You don't need to believe it with your conscious mind at first. You just need to feel it, imagine it, dwell upon it as you drift into sleep. Your subconscious doesn't argue or analyze. It accepts and executes. Feed it the right instructions, and it will work through the night to reorganize your mental patterns and attract corresponding conditions in your outer world. This is why repetition is so powerful. You don't convince your subconscious with logic or willpower. You impress it through feeling and repetition. When you affirm, "I am financially secure" once, your conscious mind might scoff. But when you repeat it morning and night with feeling, with visualization, with the conviction that it's already true in the invisible realm, you begin to impress this new belief upon your deeper mind. And here's what most people miss. Your subconscious is working right now. This very moment, it's operating according to the beliefs you've already impressed upon it. If you've impressed fear, it's creating fearful experiences. If you've impressed lack, it's perpetuating conditions of scarcity. But if you begin now to impress abundance, health, and success, it immediately begins working to manifest these realities. The process is impersonal and automatic. Your subconscious doesn't care about your past or your current circumstances. It only responds to your present mental attitude. This means you can start fresh right now, regardless of what happened yesterday or 10 years ago. The slate is clean the moment you change your dominant mental impression. Think of it this way. If you've been unemployed for months and constantly thinking, "I can't find work," your subconscious accepts this as instruction. It will then guide you to overlook opportunities, fail interviews, or attract circumstances that confirm your belief. But the instant you change your inner conviction to, "The perfect opportunity is seeking me out," your subconscious begins working in the opposite direction. It heightens your awareness, improves your confidence, and draws you magnetically toward the right connections. Your subconscious is never idle. It's always creating, always manifesting, always bringing your inner world into outer expression. The question isn't whether it's working, it's what you're instructing it to create.